7 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Albany Transportation Commission meeting for December 4th, 2025. Please take the roll.
Commissioner Barnes.
Present.
Commissioner Hiley.
Here.
Commissioner Kerr. Commissioner McCroskey.
Here.
Commissioner Zuba. Here. And Chair Javindal.
Present.
Commissioner Ugalde is absent.
With our land acknowledgement, the City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lichon. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe, together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Okay. Next on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity to address the Commission on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. Do we have anyone wishing to make comments at this time? Any online?
I'm sorry, the comment was on what topic?
Anything that is not on tonight's agenda? It looks like we do not have anyone here or online wishing to make general public comment. That takes us to the consent calendar, which are routine items that we will enact with a single motion, unless there's anything anyone wishes to pull for discussion. Okay. Seeing none, would anyone like to move the consent calendar for approval?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please take the roll.
Vice Chair Barnes.
Aye.
Commissioner Hiley.
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr. Commissioner McCroskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Zuba.
Yes.
Chair Javindal.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, that takes us to item 4-1, San Pablo Avenue Corridor Projects Update.
I'll pull up the slides and introduce Matt Bomberg, Principal and Transportation Engineer with Alameda CTC.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to come present tonight on two different projects that Alameda CTC is delivering in the San Pablo Avenue corridor within the City of Albany. Joined here by my colleague Emma Burkhart, as a transportation engineer with Alameda CTC, and want to also just thank city staff for all their partnership on these projects that are sort of years in the making in terms of planning and project development and design. And we're anticipating both of these, the two projects that I'm here to present on tonight, will be ready to start construction by next year. So as we're getting close to construction, it's a good time for an update on the projects to this commission. Next slide, please. So the presentation I have prepared is actually fairly high level, but I do have a lot of material and backup slides that we can go to during the Q&A with information on some of the specific locations and improvements proposed as part of the project. But I'm going to cover just some general corridor background and then an update on the two specific projects, which are the Parallel Bike Improvement Project and the Safety Enhancements Projects that are within Albany. Next slide, please. So Alameda CTC, just to start with a little history, has been doing corridor planning that has ultimately led to three different projects within Alameda County dating back to 2017. There was a multi-year bi-county planning effort involving 7 different cities, and transit operators, Caltrans, like all of the different agency stakeholders along the San Pablo Avenue corridor. It sort of received a lot of attention from Alameda CTC due to the safety issues along the corridor, its importance as a transit trunk line. It's the second highest ridership corridor for AC Transit, and the land use along the corridor with a high concentration of priority development areas and equity priority communities. Next slide, please. In 2022, after several years of planning and sort of visioning and considering different options for the corridor, there were 3 different projects that were identified to move forward within Alameda County, 2 of which touch the City of Albany. And so this map shows, it's a very stylized way, what those 3 projects are. This was based on kind of years of outreach and as well as technical considerations. Within Albany, the two projects are safety enhancements, which is sort of shown in green here. And these are improvements to make it safer and easier for pedestrians and cyclists to cross San Pablo Avenue, as well as some transit stop improvements to make buses move more efficiently along San Pablo Avenue. And then the other project is parallel bike route improvements, which provides sort of accommodation for cyclists traveling north-south through the broader corridor on kind of low-stress bike boulevard type streets parallel to San Pablo Avenue. The third project, which Alameda CTC is working on with cities of Oakland, Emeryville, and a piece of it touches Berkeley, is a longer-term project that would implement dedicated bus lanes and bike lanes on San Pablo Avenue. But that is not within City of Albany. Next slide. This is a bit more of a zoom in on the northern two projects. So the yellow bar is intended to reflect the safety enhancements project, which extends from essentially the county line, the El Cerrito Albany city limit, down to Hines Avenue, which is kind of north of Ashby Avenue in South Berkeley. Within Albany, this project sort of fills in some of the locations. The city had a recent pedestrian safety improvement project along San Pablo Avenue that installed things like median refuges, flashing beacons, curb ramp upgrades at a number of the intersections. And then this project will kind of address some of the intersections not addressed by that project, such as Solano, Washington, Clay, Brighton, Marin Avenue. And then the parallel route improvement project is represented by the bold green lines. And within Albany, there are two kind of locations that the parallel route improvement project kind of covers, which are the intersections of Canes Marin and Canes Solano, and the project is focused on kind of crossing improvements for the bike boulevard crossings of those major streets. Next slide, please. So this is just a little more detail on the types of elements and the status of the two projects. And I should mention that the Transportation Commission and actually City Council both got a presentation and took actions in support of the concept design of both of these two projects back in 2023. And since that time, we have secured full funding for the projects, made significant progress with the design of the projects, completed all of the state environmental clearance, and we're close to completing the NEPA clearance for the Parallel Bike Route Improvement Project, which does have federal funding. And we're projecting to be ready to advertise this project for construction by spring of next year. I talked about some of the elements that are within Albany, which are the kind of major street crossing improvements at Canes Solano and Canes Marin. Elsewhere, this project within Berkeley and North Oakland includes elements such as diverters, traffic circles, wayfinding, curb ramp work, street paving. But in Albany, because of the sort of work that the city's already done on the Canes and Adams bike boulevards, the project's really focused on those two crossing locations. Next slide, please. The safety enhancements project includes elements such as bus bulbs, which are sort of large bulb outs allowing a bus to stop in lane, kind of expanding the space for passenger waiting and meaning that the bus doesn't have to pull out of traffic and pull back in. These are proposed at the limited AC transit stops, which within Albany is Solano Avenue and San Pablo Avenue. And then there are also various locations with pedestrian hybrid beacons, flashing beacons, median refuges, curb ramp upgrades. There's also two locations where there are kind of offset intersecting bike boulevards where the street doesn't connect directly through, and the project would be installing a short kind of one block section of protected bikeway along San Pablo to kind of assist cyclists in making that connection across San Pablo. One of those locations is within Albany at Clay and Brighton. This project is also fully funded, and we're at 95% design. We've completed all the environmental clearance, and we're also projecting to have design complete and be ready for construction by summer of next year. Next slide, please. Just wanted to just touch on some of the kind of refinements that we've been making on these projects as we've been coordinating with city staff on the development of the plans, specifications, and estimates, and sort of since the last presentation on the concept design to the Transportation Commission. So with the parallel bike project, we have, and some of these are not within Albany, but one of the topics has been kind of bike detection at major streets. In the Berkeley sections of the project, we've sort of based on city experience with different detection technologies, and at their request, we've changed from video detection to push buttons. It's actually still a topic of discussion for the Albany crossings at Keynes Solano and Keynes Marin with city staff, just given some of the unique geometric considerations at those intersections that might make video a little more favorable in terms of bikes waiting where you would want them to. The next 3 bullets here are really all outside of Albany. There's been a lot of work refining curb ramp designs and actually bringing some of the kind of Albany developed curb ramp design guidance to other jurisdictions and kind of having that cross-pollinate across the plans. The traffic circle locations within Berkeley, we have some of them we've moved to a mountable traffic circle design that works better with some of the light industrial land use there and large truck activity at the intersections where they're proposed, as well as just refining the sizes of the circles to kind of accommodate necessary design vehicles. And then we've also been working on just developing the project specifications, which for a project that touches 3 different jurisdictions, each of which have sort of different kind of approaches to means and methods and materials for things like asphalt and paving, and harmonizing all of that has actually been a fair amount of work working with the different city staff. Next slide, please. On the safety enhancements project, some of the kind of topics that have been major focal points is the final design has been refined. Again, the curb ramp designs. There's some challenging locations along San Pablo Avenue where you have business doors or other constraints kind of right up against the back of the sidewalk that makes it challenging to achieve ADA compliant ramps while also kind of getting directional ramps in there and all of the other sort of things that we'd like to see in best practice curb ramp designs. The bike detection technology on this project, we've also moved away from video towards inductive loops, towards push buttons. Within Albany, this partly relates to the fact that these are at Caltrans operated traffic signals, and the city's, the traffic signals are maintained by Caltrans, and they have a lot of say in the detection technology as a result. The bus bulbs, we've been sort of working to figure out the drainage and the grading of those so that the curb height is 6 inches, but the slopes are ADA compliant 2%, which in some cases has meant moving to a design where it sort of drains the water back towards the sidewalk and into a vegetated area, just because of existing roadway slopes and need for sidewalk cross slopes. There is one bus stop location within City of Albany that was originally proposed to be relocated from southbound Castro to southbound Portland Avenue to have it more close to the northbound stop and just improve the spacing between the different stops. And there were challenges with getting an ADA compliant sidewalk at the proposed bus stop location just because of the existing business door heights relative to the curb height. And so because of some of the grading challenges, we're now looking at keeping it at its existing location at southbound Castro. And then a final topic has been just working with the cities to develop construction sequencing and lane closure plans. It's obviously a corridor that's heavily used by all modes and lots of active businesses, and so ensuring that necessary access is provided and that construction detours are realistic in terms of how particularly pedestrians are going to follow them has been a key focal point in the design development. So with that, next slide, please. This is mostly an informational update, and as mentioned, we do have more details on specific locations that we can turn to. But we do have one requested action, which is we are looking to convene a sort of workshop-style meeting around the parallel bike project to talk about a couple of design topics that are of cross-jurisdictional interest for a cross-jurisdictional project. And we did want to ask if the Transportation Commission could select somebody to be sort of the representative to that meeting and then report back afterwards. So hoping you could work among yourselves to find somebody and take an action to nominate someone. With that.
Just a question about the timing of that. When do you plan to convene that? What's the window?
Ideally before the end of the year, and this would be a virtual meeting, but the end of the year is quickly seeming very close, so we'll have to see if that's feasible. Yeah.
Any questions from the commission?
Sorry, gathering which one to start with. I noticed in the presentation provided in the agenda with some more of the specifics at each intersection, there were some where there was like a call out for the detection on one side but not the other. I'm wondering if that's just was like a formatting thing. Are there, let me pull up one as an example.
That was just trying to keep the image from being too cluttered with too many callouts. But
Cool.
Yeah, so the
Keynes and Marin, for example.
we can jump to that image. So yeah, at this intersection, this is one of the a PED hybrid beacon. We're actually proposing both video detection and bike push buttons right now. So the kind of gray hatched boxes here, one of them's labeled on the north approach, not on the south approach, but it is there on the south approach. That would be the video detection zone. And then there would also be, sort of as a backup, a bike push button.
Okay.
In addition to the pedestrian push button, which would be more located where pedestrians would want it. So.
Thank you. And then at the San Pablo crossings at Washington and then Brighton Clay, where you have to do the like little jog over, is any wayfinding or signage included in those plans?
So the Washington crossing, this actually got quite a bit of discussion when it was presented to the Transportation Commission a couple of years ago. What's proposed here is actually signalizing the south leg of the intersection, which right now is unsignalized, and then essentially mainline San Pablo Avenue traffic would be held while cyclists and side street traffic make the two turns, one onto San Pablo and then the other off of San Pablo onto Washington. So that there are sharrows currently proposed in the design because it would be a shared lane, sort of operational for bikes, but they would be doing it without mixing with the main San Pablo traffic. We don't currently have any specific wayfinding signs. It's something we could take a look at with city staff, like maybe something on the side street approaches, kind of directing people how to get through the intersection. And then the Clay and Brighton one, this one is actually proposed to be a Class 4 kind of separated bikeway with a concrete separation island between the outer travel lane and the bike lane. There are supposed to be sort of intersection crossing markings for cyclists through the intersection, which would sort of convey the path through the intersection. But yeah, I think again we could look at wayfinding on the side street, kind of approaching it.
Thank you. I have one more question.
Oh, yeah, while we're on this slide, if I may. There seems to be a net parking loss in this section on San Pablo. Could you detail how many parking spaces are lost? The red lining, the red curbing.
Yeah, I don't have that number available right now. We did do outreach to all of the businesses back in 2023 2003, before we brought the concept design to the Transportation Commission and the council. The two blocks here, one of them is actually on the southbound side is the sort of Albany Bowl redevelopment site. And so we've been, that's going to have very different uses with different curb management needs. The northbound side is predominantly the Goodwill, which has a large off-street parking lot. But
There are two other businesses there that I personally use those parking spaces, and I'm just concerned about loss of those. So it'll be useful in future iterations if you can detail that for us.
okay.
You go ahead, and then I'll ask mine.
Actually, if I could follow up on Judy's comment, two other businesses on the northbound side?
Yeah, there's a dog grooming and a ceramic studio.
Aren't those located to the south of the stoplight?
No,
Okay.
I don't think they are. I believe that the red
They're
line,
in the intersection.
the redlining will
More or
affect.
less at the
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
My last question is about the bike detection cameras. And you mentioned that there's a question of you want to use them or not, and I'll save some thoughts for the comment section. But a question I had, because I've also observed that they're effective in some locations, like I use the Ashby and Hillegas crossing quite a bit every day, and I think that one's really effective. So is there anything that you guys have found that makes some technologies more effective than others? And is the plan to use those types of effective technologies in this plan?
So we are, as the agency that's constructing this project but won't actually own and operate it, we're largely deferring to the agencies that are going to own and operate it in terms of what technology they want to see or which product. And oftentimes it's what are they currently maintaining and not wanting to be maintaining too many different technologies or products. I don't know if city staff have comments on that in your experiences, but.
Yeah, I mean, what we've heard, we haven't operated these in Albany, but what we've heard from peer cities is that there are a lot of false positive triggers and a lot of operational needs to go out and try to maintain the video detection systems. And we rely on the county for our signal maintenance currently. It's sort of a question of effectiveness and capacity to maintain them operating, to take advantage of the passive detection versus the robustness of the push button. We're looking at the potential to have both, if that works. The question is for like Solano Canes, can you optimize both well, or do we need to choose one or the other because of the geometry of the intersection? So that's what we're working on.
Yeah. Actually, if you go to the Solano Canes image, yeah. So at this image, because of the way the crosswalks are aligned, and then there's also a parklet on the north side of the street, which kind of creates a sightline obstruction for a motorist traveling from right to left across the page to see a bike waiting on that north leg. It's really advantageous to get the bikes waiting out ahead of the crosswalk even, but it's also really hard to find a place to put a push button there. So that's kind of a reason that considering video detection, but yeah, it's kind of a question of what the city can ultimately commit to in terms of products and maintenance.
And you had a follow-up
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, go for it.
So are these video detection systems significantly different than the ones that are already at Santa Fe and Marin and Jackson and Marin?
I'm not the expert, but there's a difference. My understanding is there's a difference for general signal video detection that doesn't really matter if it thinks it's a car or thinks it's a bike, but it's going to give you the green, versus an RFB that needs to only be trying to trigger, or a hawk that's only been trying to trigger for a bike, but you don't want a car going through to trigger that sequence.
I can help
Thank
with
you.
that one, because the intersection at Ashby-Hilligus was the example, the first pedestrian hybrid beacon that Berkeley did, where it used passive detection using video detection. The idea was that it was supposed to trigger for bikes, but not for cars. So the video detection zone was made into slices, each of which was like 2 feet wide. So if you occupied 1 or 2 slices, it was presumably a bike. If it occupied more slices of video, it was a bigger object, and thus probably a car. The intent was that it would then ignore the call to the signal, because we didn't want to trigger it just for cars, only for bikes. So that was the intent. It was a little hard to get it to work, whether it was that particular approach to using the video detection, but there were certain times a day the lighting became problematic and it was not reliable. So in the example that you've got for Marin at Keynes, there's a beacon, a barrier down the median where the pedestrian hybrid beacon is. That one, other than a car that stops and then turns right, we don't worry about a false call that's going to let cars cross the intersection, because we're going to prohibit that, is what I'm seeing. But again, there's a little bit of concern that you might trigger the pedestrian hybrid beacon, and if it starts before the car leaves, the beacon's going to go and there's not going to be anyone to use it. So that's where you may want to think about having the push button as a backup if you decide not to use the beacon, or if the beacon has a detection zone that's not likely to be occupied by cars. A car that's turning right is going to be kind of over to the right. A bike might put a bike detection box left side of the lane. So I appreciate that it's a non-trivial question in some places, but I think that the general treatment of not making it easier for cars to just go back and forth on Keynes is a good thing that helps to simplify at least one of the potential unintended consequences. Thank you. Any other questions? You had one.
Yeah, I had, this is just a really straightforward question. Are these plans coming back to us for review at any further, like any future time, or?
We are planning to come back to the Transportation Commission.
Okay.
Probably early next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now, we're mostly just, this is not the time to like hash out all the details. Is that what you're saying?
But
Or you
like
want-
as much
you want
feedback
some hashing
or
out
questions
now.
as we can get now.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
And just to kind of follow up on that, what is the anticipated timeline of this project? When would it actually begin to be built out?
So for the parallel bike route project, we would have the design complete towards the end of next spring, which means there's some time to hire a contractor. Like actual groundbreaking would be towards the end of next year, most likely. For the safety enhancements project, it's about 3 months behind. So, yeah.
And then just as a general comment, throughout this presentation and many presentations that I've been to as a commissioner on the Transportation Commission, we refer to bikes. We're talking about a whole bunch of other different modes of transportation, and I would encourage all of us to use a broader language when we're talking about the use of these lanes. It's personal transportation devices, it's electronic bikes, it's all sorts of things. So the bike is a little bit dated in its usage, and I think we should broaden that comment. Thanks.
If there's no other questions from the commission, we'll go to public comments and questions, and then come back for the commission discussion. Or did you have another question? Please.
You also had a slide in the packet for the San Pablo Dartmouth upgrade. Is that part of this program?
Yes, and this, actually, is it possible to bring the presentation back up? Because this is actually another one where it'd be great to get some transportation commissioner feedback.
Comments on that one? No questions about it.
Well, I just thought we'd bring it into discussion before public comment so that it, yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't seem fair.
So this is an existing pedestrian hybrid beacon that does not have great ways of getting detected if you're in a personal transportation device, bicycle, electric bicycle, mobility device. So what's proposed here is to add push buttons that are better located for somebody in a cyclist or other mobility device who's crossing as a bike. There's a couple of different locations that we are looking at for placing them. So if any of you all have thoughts as users of this crossing, I think the existing one is shown by the blue dot. But for a cyclist, that's kind of involves going off to your right and then coming back to the left. So the other colored dots here are potential other placement options. I don't know if
So, without going into my own personal preferences, wondering if you considered, since Dartmouth is a right turn only onto San Pablo at that point, there's an intersection in Berkeley at MLK and Channing where there's actually a slot, and from Channing to MLK, cars are required to turn right, and there's a slot in the middle that's protected for cyclists who are allowed to go straight through. So there's a small median, and I think there may be a button there as well, maybe not. But did you consider a solution like that?
we have not looked at that, and I'm familiar with the location you're talking about. We would need to take a look at large vehicle turning for garbage trucks and other vehicles to turn on to Dartmouth, but can take a look at that.
And Ken, just historically, having worked at Herrick Hospital when it had an emergency room, it was an ER access point. So the turn lane was intended, I believe, to facilitate emergency vehicles turning up the street.
On Channing?
On Channing, yeah.
So that was supportive of emergency vehicles?
I believe so, yeah.
Great, great, thank you. Not just two-wheeled urban attack vehicles?
No, there's lots of others.
Okay.
Michael?
Or we had, on the Keynes-Adams bike projects, we had held off on painting the green stripes until we had funding complete to do all the other traffic calming. So are we done now? So with this money, do we have any more funding issues for getting those done?
This project will not fund or deliver changes to the Keynes-Adams corridor that we've discussed in our pilot evaluation. It's really been a timing issue. When this project was going through conceptual planning and engagement with folks, we were embarking on our pilot, and so to respect that we were doing a pilot project that we didn't know the outcome of, we asked them to look at a couple crossing locations, but that we were, we didn't know what we wanted at that time. So this project is not going to deliver the change in the, putting in the contraflow cycling lane that has been the design direction for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go to public questions and comments. I saw a couple hands online. Maybe we should start with them. If there are questions, we'll save those up and answer them at the end, most likely.
Amy Smolens.
There. First of all, just what Commissioner McCroskey mentioned, that treatment at Channing and MLK is really good. And I don't think there's a button. I think it's, from what I can recall, it's video detection or somehow it's detected. But that's really good, crossing MLK. So that would be something nice to cross San Pablo. But in general, I live on Keynes and I walk or bike pretty much every day on Keynes. And this is really talking about safety and enhancements to slow drivers and get people across Marin and Solano, but nothing else. And a main problem is people just drive too fast on Keynes, on Adams, and on all the cross streets. The consultant mentioned traffic circles as an easy, cheap way to slow traffic and said, but we're not going to do it in Albany. But that kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, I ride all the time in so many locations in Berkeley and Emeryville and Richmond and Oakland, and there are those small traffic circles which are cheap and simple, and sometimes they're just the rubberized runs, sometimes they're cement and they have flowers that the community maintains, which are really nice. Cars drive too fast on Keynes and Adams and Washington and Portland and Brighton, not just on Marin and Solano. And, you know, there's a pretty basic infrastructure for safety enhancements that most other cities seem to be able to have, and we have zero. And I would love to see a few added at Dartmouth and Keynes or Washington, Portland, Brighton, other places to slow traffic down, because we really need to do something like that in conjunction with this project if we really want to make the routes actually safe for people of all ages and abilities on their bicycles and their adult trikes and their scooters and their recumbents and everything else that they ride in. People ride to school on these routes all the time, and the traffic is too fast. So I hope you can do something simple and inexpensive, like these traffic circles that you were touting in Berkeley and other places, and that all of us ride in Berkeley and other cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Brian Martin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Brian Martin. I live on Adams Street. It looks like there's no real improvements in this particular presentation for the Adams parallel corridor, and I look forward to seeing what the city has in store and when, as was mentioned a minute ago, for when the striping can be done and how that funding is going. But I did want to mention a few things. One is just about the businesses, the pottery and the dog grooming just south of the Goodwill. The grooming, I know just from walking by it, it has parking in the back. I don't know if that's only for employees, but there is off-street parking that somebody can use. And then pottery, I don't think they have any, so that is something to think about. I had a question about the bus bulb outs, the in-lane stops, I think I heard them described as. Is this where there's a big bulb out and the bus kind of takes the whole lane and doesn't pull out of traffic? Because I know we have that on Solano at the Hal's office and the As You Wish. But for bigger streets like San Pablo, I know there's one in Oakland on Telegraph at 40th Street that's a real nightmare. So if you're driving north on Telegraph, I just want to make sure this kind of scenario is avoided. There's only one northbound lane, and the bus stop is, so say you're driving north on Telegraph at 40th, you go through the intersection at 40th, there's a bus bulb out right there in the northeast corner, and the bus, when it stops, it blocks the only northbound lane. And the issue there is that you have to sit behind the bus in traffic. It becomes a gridlock issue. You're into 40th Street trying to cross it to get, and what people end up doing out of desperation is to get out of the intersection and to get on with their journey in their cars is they'll pull around the bus to the left, which is to go into oncoming traffic. And so that gets, there's a turn lane there in the opposite direction. So that gets really dicey. So I'm hoping if you could speak to if there's anything like that where the bus chokes off the only lane, and that ends up putting cars in intersections. That I hope that can be avoided. That's it for me. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Matt, could you confirm that we're not removing any through traffic lanes on San Pablo, so there will always be a second lane to pass the bus?
Yeah, that's correct. There would still be 2 lanes.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Do we have any more speakers online?
No more speakers online.
Very good. Anyone here in person wish to comment? Please step up.
Sorry, we have a late speaker online. Ian McLeod, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yeah, thank you for this. It's great to see something happening, improvements being made. Regarding the parallel routes, I think it's really important to remember that, they really should be pleasant and easy to use. They should be aesthetically pleasing, safe, continuous with few stops. I think there's a lot of work to do on both streets. People have talked about traffic calming measures. I think it's really important. Roundabouts, slowing traffic down. They need more trees. I mean, part of a safe, pleasant route is having shade. There's a dearth of street trees on those streets. So, that alone would make it more pleasant. Regarding San Pablo, I think what we're doing is very helpful for trying to get across San Pablo, but nothing for getting along San Pablo with bikes. I think you really need to remember that parallel routes, they're helpful, but they are no substitute for protected bike lanes along San Pablo. I think that's the crux of the matter here, is that we're doing very minor tweaks and ignoring the big situation, which is that San Pablo Avenue should be a regional cycling, part of a regional cycling network, a regional cycling boulevard connecting Richmond all the way to Oakland and Emeryville. I think that's really the big picture. And that's what we should be working for and putting that in our ATP and working really hard for that. We should be working with ACTC on that and coordinating with transit and bus routes. I think that's the key. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm speaking on my own behalf, but part of this is that we are going to get a lot more new housing on San Pablo, and we need to coordinate all our new residents and give them the opportunities to use bikes and transit and walk instead of using cars. Otherwise, we're making a much worse traffic situation in our city. Everyone should have equal access to protected bike lanes right outside their front doors, not have to go out the back door and be second-class citizens and use parallel routes. It doesn't really facilitate mode shift with cycling. It doesn't facilitate transit-oriented development to just have sort of the backdoor routes. I think we really need to look at the regional situation, look at creating the continuous cycling network that is connected on both ends of our cities to our other cities and to other parallel and to perpendicular routes through our cities, such as Solano Avenue and Marin Avenue. So I think we really need to look at the big picture and create a really good cycling network and support transit, especially on San Pablo. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, yeah, I live on Marin and I ride my bike to work and I ride my bike with my 4.5-year-old daughter.
Timer.
She is already on a scoot bike and she's probably really close to riding a pedal bike too. And I think it's going to be harder and harder to keep her on the back of my long-tail bike. And we often will ride to the waterfront, and the crossing across San Pablo is really difficult. There's a couple of ways to do it, but neither is good. The two-stage crossing at Marin across San Pablo is really difficult. Like, I would not do that if she was not on the back of my bike. And even on the back of my bike, I don't like to do it. It's very uncomfortable. And I'm a great cyclist. Like, I ride all over and like all the time. So if I'm not comfortable with it, like, newer riders are definitely not going to be comfortable with it. And the alternate route is down Dartmouth and across to the really nice two-way bike lane, like in front of the new development. But then it just ends at the Gill track. So like, you basically have to get onto the sidewalk and then ride. So there really should be a better connection there. Like, if we want people to be riding places, like, we have to make it comfortable and easy, especially for people who are like 4.5 years old and their parents who want them to be able to ride on the street and not just on multi-use paths. So I'm really glad that there are safety improvements happening, but I think it's really important to think about the connections and making sure that it's actually fully safe and it's not just like disconnected areas that are safe. So thank you.
Thank you. And you raise a good point with respect to the networks. And I will comment that when the two-way cycle track was made on San Pablo, the city did passed legislation explicitly stating that you could ride your bike on that part of San Pablo. So if you feel any qualms about it, it's okay.
I mean, on the sidewalk.
On the
that
sidewalk,
part of-
sorry, thank you. Between Marin and where the two-way cycle track starts along the edge of the Gill Tract, that's one place. The other place is on the corner of Dartmouth and San Pablo. But yes, those are kind of stopgap measures. We don't prior to that. Anyway, any other comments?
The Alameda CTC project actually does have some improvements proposed at San Pablo Marin. Justin, if you're able to bring the slides back up, to make the two-stage turn better than it is currently. It's sort of working within the framework of Marin Avenue being an existing striped bike lane along a busy street, but what we're proposing is a two-stage turn box in the top right corner with a concrete island kind of in the parking lane there, so that if a cyclist is waiting there, they're in the shadow of and protected by that concrete island. One of the other issues that we heard about when we presented on this project 2 years ago was the westbound approach to the intersection. There's kind of a pinch point in the bike lane because of the curvature of the roadway. So we are actually kind of realigning the roadway by a couple of feet to remove that pinch point.
Which pinch point is that?
This is on the bottom right corner here. This is in front of, well, I guess there's two gas stations. I can't say. The
northern gas station.
Yeah, the northeast corner. So.
Okay.
So there's actually kind of a convoluted storm drain hazard there as well.
Yeah, that storm drain would be reconstructed as a inlet type where it's contained within the curb and not sticking out into the bike lane. And then right now, cars sort of start the turn as they're going into the intersection and drift into the cycling or mobility device lane, so it would straighten that out approaching the intersection. So.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Okay. And back to the commission for discussion or any other questions that may have come up.
Well, let me just add, since there was an earlier question on the parking, I did bring up the earlier outreach materials that identified approximately 15 spaces parking impact between Brighton and Clay, and then approximately 4 north of Brighton with the relocated bus stop. So those, correct.
Thank you.
Right. Well, first, I just want to thank you guys so much for all the work and for bringing it to the commission. It's really great to get to look at and comment on, so thank you. And also to all the public comment, really great ideas, and I hear you, and I definitely want to urge everyone to stay engaged with the active transportation plan. I hope that we've heard what people were suggesting about the intersections and the connectivity, and especially the all ages and abilities. And if those things can't get addressed in this already 100% design, I'm looking forward to carrying that energy to the active transportation plan. So yeah, maybe we'll have some more updates about timing of that. But on this plan, acknowledging again that it's at 95 and 100%, but also kind of piggybacking on the suggestions that Ken earlier made and a public comment made, I would like to urge also for those, what is it called? The little slot, I think someone called it, especially at the Marin crossing and the Solano crossing, to relocate that push button, especially if we're looking at the possibility of eliminating the video detection or having a combination, basically a situation where we're relying on the push button. The way it's currently configured, especially in each of these intersections where cars are going to be turning right, is with the push button also on the right. It just automatically puts the person using the bike lane in a dangerous position for the car turning right. So anything we can do to move that push button out of that direct turn, right turn, really, really want to urge for. And if a slotted solution can do that, that would be amazing. But most importantly, just want to make sure that that safety risk is addressed of the right turn. Another thing that could help is on the Canes crossing to extend that bike box across more of the lane. It looks like it's just kind of over in the corner, but if it could extend the full width of it's a vehicle lane, that could help with the crossing. And then my last suggestion would be at San Pablo and Marin, because so many people use that protected bike lane on Marin. It looks like right now in the design we have curb ramps going, like 2 curb ramps in each direction. I might consider making that just one wider curb ramp, depending on other people's thoughts too. But my thought with that is just people are coming on and off that bike and pedestrian path, that having a larger curb ramp could be easier to get on and off.
I'm sorry, I spaced for a second. Which intersection was that at?
San Pablo and Marin, the
Southwest?
West corner, yeah.
Yeah, currently the project isn't proposing any work on that corner, so that would be out of the footprint at this point. My understanding is that there is, a notion to extend the existing two-way cycle track in front of Sprouts all the way to that intersection, and could be done as part of a future project there, yeah. Good things to look into on the other detection comments.
Thank you. Oh, and also, yeah, thanks for the looking into the signage at the San Pablo crossings. I think that would help.
Other comments?
Let me turn it on. My general comments are that I strongly agree with the importance of signage. There's a lot of times where I'm familiar with this area, and I even am like, wait, how do I get from this bike lane, this protected bike lane, to like another bike route or another, like the next stage? So I think we need significantly more clear signage, both in terms of routes for cycling, but also for how the cyclist is, in particular cyclists, are supposed to cross the road. I know that you're looking at different bike detection technologies and approaches, and oftentimes when I'm coming up on my bike and I'm coming to an intersection, I have no idea how I'm supposed to cross the street. Am I supposed to stay in the lane and there is like some kind of detection that is going to trigger the light? Am I supposed to dismount and go over and cross as a pedestrian and push the button? Is there some, is there another thing that is supposed to trigger? And so it's really confusing for cyclists to know, like, how am I supposed to cross this road? And I would strongly discourage situations where we're dismounting and getting into the pedestrian areas, because it creates a lot of just chaos and confusion where people are trying to get off. Like, you don't want to get off your bike on the street because it's not safe, and so then you take your bike onto the curb, but then you're interfacing with pedestrians, and it's just really chaotic. So I would encourage that if there is any sort of button that has to be pushed, that you're following those designs where it's like a protected area that a bike is kind of separated from the cars, and there's a button that they can push without having to get into the area where pedestrians are also trying to navigate. So those are my two big things, and I think also going to the Keynes and Marin intersection. This is an area that I frequently I struggle with because I also am regularly biking with young kids. And so if you're going eastbound, and I think that this is where it's really important to have good coordination between these San Pablo designs and whatever we're going to add to the active transportation plan and our own city designs, because I recognize that some of this is kind of gray zone of who manages what. But having a streamless connection. So when you're going eastbound and you're on Marin and that nice bike lane ends, and then you are trying to turn left, and you can't turn left on San Pablo because there's no bike lanes, and so you're going up to Keynes to turn left. It's really not at all feasible for a cyclist to get over and turn left there with all of the other oncoming traffic. And I think one potential, I don't know how this would work, maybe one potential solution is to have like the bike and pedestrian lights triggered for a little bit longer so that cyclists have an opportunity to get out in front of the traffic and then be able to turn left on Keynes before all of the car traffic is coming. But that's a really complicated connection between one type of bicycle infrastructure and another. So that section, I think, really needs to be explored and developed in like a much more significant way. I have more comments, but should I just keep going and get my stuff out? Okay. The other one is the San Pablo and Dartmouth bike detection and pedestrian crossing. So this is a crossing that I use daily, multiple times a day, to drop off and pick up kids from preschool. And this is such a mess, to be honest. It's great that we have that, but I agree that we need to have some better way for bicyclists to cross San Pablo there, because I know that we're technically allowed to get up onto the bike lane, or onto the sidewalk when you're going westbound on Dartmouth trying to cross San Pablo. But sometimes there are cars that are rapidly turning right onto Dartmouth from San Pablo, and you're you're basically crossing that traffic, that potential traffic, to get up onto the sidewalk. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think the way we were envisioning that it, like by adding bike crossing, more formalized bike crossing there, is that the bikes would
no longer have to get. So it's like a design that you were talking about where bikes can just go straight through the intersection. They don't have to get onto the sidewalk.
Correct. Yeah, are you saying people kind of make a left on the near side of the intersection and then get up on the sidewalk and then cross?
Yeah, so what happens is people are coming down Dartmouth, and then you just kind of cross over to get onto the sidewalk to be able to cross San Pablo.
Yeah. So
that's not safe.
We're trying to facilitate bikes being able to stay on the right side of the street.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. The other thing that often I find a challenge, and this is for both people who are on bikes or any mode that are trying to cross San Pablo, is that the light, and this might have to do with like the hawk lighting, but what happens is the pedestrian crossing and bike crossing turns green, and then whoever is stopped there crosses, and then the light continues to be green, and then the car light turns to red flashing. And so often I see that cars are tracking the people who are crossing, and then as soon as those people who are waiting cross, they start going. And other bikes and pedestrians who are approaching the intersection, they see a green crossing signal, which makes them feel like it's safe for them to cross. And cars, often I see them like starting to go, and then they realize that somebody else is coming through the intersection, and they like have to stop urgently. So I don't know what the configuration is, but I think that it's like a ticking time bomb there of somebody getting hit. Because I see this all the time, because I cross that street multiple times a day. So that's another concern that I have. And also that intersection is tricky, and I am excited to hear that you're planning to have a little bit more separation from pedestrians and bicyclists there, because both sides, but particularly the west side, it's like everybody is all jammed together. The cyclists going northbound, the cyclists coming southbound, pedestrians trying to cross, and it can be really complicated and messy. And so I think having better division between where pedestrians cross and where bikes are crossing would be, or like even where they're supposed to kind of be staged, ready to cross, would be really beneficial. Okay, and I also really like this idea that you talked about further up, where we're going to have, like at Washington and maybe it was also Portland, to have a way for people to get across San Pablo where it's kind of a jag and it's not a direct cross. I think that's really important, and I'm glad that that is happening. Okay.
Yeah, on the west side of the San Pablo-Dartmouth intersection, one of the potential push-button placements would be to basically construct a little island between the pedestrian waiting area and the bike waiting, what would become the bike waiting area, and put a push-button in there, so that might both organize the space better and put it in an easily reachable location for bikes.
Yeah, I think that's great. And even maybe like differentiating on the actual crosswalk, you know, like the coloring of the crosswalk as like have a bike, you know, kind of show bikes where they should go to be able to get through and onto Dartmouth, you know, and pedestrians. Yeah, that's really complicated button to push when you're approaching from the south. You have to cross over the other bike lane, which is fine because there's not, you know, sometimes there's not people there, but it's just, I don't like when we're having to cross traffic to push buttons.
Other comments?
I'd like to continue on the Dartmouth frame of mind. I disagree on the idea of putting an island between the pedestrians and wheeled vehicles, human-powered or electric wheeled vehicles. We'll come up with better terms. Partially because you're making an immediate right or left. And it's really nice to have the width to turn in as you come into that area. So I think that would have to be handled very carefully. Was there any consideration of having a shorter phase for a bicycle trigger versus a pedestrian trigger?
That's kind of more an operational question than a design question, but it's not something we've discussed, and I think a pedestrian could come along after a bike has actuated the signal, so
sure.
It could be problematic from that perspective. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So back to this, back to the example I gave about the Channing MLK intersection. I'm pretty sure it's a loop activated, so that the in-ground detection loop, which actually, if you've got a slot, it's not being driven over a lot. It's not going to get the kind of damage that those often get in regular vehicle lanes. So that hopefully would be fairly robust. I think westbound from Dartmouth crossing San Pablo is, if there is space for large-sized vehicles, is a great location for that with a loop.
We can take a look at that.
Great. I wanted to say thank you for bringing all the details and incorporating the 444 crosswalks, which I don't know if this is the normal standard, but it is certainly ours, and we appreciate it. And you called out the Albany curb cut library of design, and I want to thank staff for all their work on that. And they should take that as a kudo. So we talked about Dartmouth. You know, even if you go with video, a center slot gives you a space that's identified, as opposed to having to differentiate types of vehicles. So that seems good. And it reinforces motorist compliance, which at Dartmouth may not be that big of an issue. But then if we go over to Keynes and Marin, especially given Sarah's comment about coming eastbound and northbound on a two-wheel device, a slot northbound is going to totally wreck that opportunity for movement, which is unfortunate because that would be a great place to reinforce and have specific video identification, but perhaps a southbound slot is practical, especially since it's a non-entry for northbound motor vehicles. So you have maybe a little more space to work with there. I was having a conversation with a particularly wonky interested party about the intersection of Solano and San Pablo and the timing of the signal. Are you changing the timing of the signal at San Pablo and Solano?
This project's not proposing any signal timing changes or
Thank you.
phasing changes. Yeah.
Just needed to ask that question. So at Kansas Solano, the flashing beacons, is that only for active transportation in roadway crossing and not for pedestrians?
No, it would be for pedestrians as well. It's
great.
just a question of where pedestrian push buttons go is a little more straightforward than the bike one.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. I really like that I'm not excited about the detection boxes being in what is otherwise kind of the right turn area, but it's great that they're ahead of the crosswalks because you really do have to advance in order to get ready to cross, and that provides some separation from people trying to use the crosswalks, so that's fabulous. I think that's what I got. Thank you for all these.
Ken?
Oh, yeah, and I volunteer to be the appointee.
Okay. For Dartmouth and San Pablo, the west side push button would be a great place to put a video detection instead that's pointing straight down at the pedestrian and micromobility device waiting area. No need for a button.
I think the challenge there is that
Really narrow.
Caltrans said that they don't maintain video detection, and so they would put it on the city, which doesn't currently maintain any signals or signal equipment along San Pablo.
Yeah, yeah, because other than push buttons, trying to come up with an active or a passive detection method would be great. I don't know that magnetometer would be good for a lot of certainly no good for pedestrians, but a lot of bikes don't necessarily trigger that. There are like little radar pucks you can use, but again, you'd have to go replace those probably every 10 years. Isn't the worst thing in the world. But I'd love to have some type of passive detection on the west side there. The other question about the timing, the phasing on the pedestrian hybrid beacon, while there's a green walk signal, it should not go into flashing red for the cars. The flashing red for pedestrian hybrid beacon should never start until you're in the countdown, don't walk phase. So we should check that. Caltrans needs to fix their timing there. A green walk while it's in stop sign mode is completely in violation. So I'm happy to follow up if there's questions on that, because I've heard the phasing a lot. Then,
while you're on Dartmouth,
yes.
The slide shows options for push button location, and so I didn't explicitly respond to that, I would say option number one, the yellow location.
Then something very similar to what Ken said as far as the bike detection zones for Canes and Marin, Canes and Solano, because both of those have bollards to prevent vehicle entry in the wrong direction on those blocks. That's a perfect spot to set up a bike detection zone because cars can't pass through it. We don't even necessarily need to add any additional slot or whatever. We just create one with paint right there. I recognize that on Solano, we want to get the bikes forward, visible past the parklet.
So there may be an issue with southbound Canes motorists turning left to Solano. It's not a forced right.
True. We might have to add it with the bikes, but I mean, it's between right-turning cars or left-turning cars. I mean, there's through as well, but
Just in terms of detection.
yeah, there's some options there. The other relative to how to turn left from eastbound Marin onto northbound Canes, if we're setting up a detection zone there, it'd be great to sort of make that function as a two-stage left turn box, because that would pull over there, wait for the pedestrian hybrid beacon to go off, and then you get a protected crossing versus trying to weave across traffic, because I've had real issues there in the past where pedestrians are waiting to cross northbound, and I had to hop off my bike and go stand in the road to get cars to stop for them. We're just like streaming by, ignoring the pedestrian right-of-way, which was extraordinarily frustrating. But that was at Marin at Canes. I used to ride my bike eastbound there on the way to work, and I stopped for a father and his daughter waiting to cross the street. All the cars behind me kept on passing to the left. I started like signaling left, and I was like, fine, I'm going to walk out into the lane with my bike and all my flashing lights because I'm much more visible, and just block traffic so they could cross, because it felt ridiculous that you would have 15 cars in a row not yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk, and someone on a bike does.
While we're talking about this, could we bring up the Canes-Marin intersection plan? Because I think we want to look at that, because it looks like the bike box is before the crosswalk.
Right.
Which, yeah, if it's intended to facilitate a two-stage turn, is quite a bit out of direction.
Yeah, for two-stage left, you'd want it in front of the crosswalk, and maybe you do both.
So we're talking about the bottom of this illustration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think, Matt, you're familiar with there. As long as the two-stage left is between the crosswalk and basically the Marin Avenue bike lane, it's a perfectly good spot for
In the
it.
shadow of the bulb out.
Yeah.
Lots of space.
You have space to sort of swing and make your turn there. I think that would be good.
What do you think, Sarah?
I don't know if I fully understand this design by looking at it here, but
The idea is that there's space located between the crosswalk and the bike lane.
Exactly.
oh, yeah. So somebody could come in there and then
Swing
yeah,
around.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's just having that clearly communicated that that's the expectation of what a bike would do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also part of it.
Yeah,
Just
so
like-
you would paint a green box and then
Yeah.
put a bike symbol and a left turn arrow that essentially shows your path of travel to set
Right.
up for that crossing.
Yeah,
Which you can see in the San Pablo Marin intersection plan in the northwest corner.
I appreciate, a lot of effort to try to make these work well, and try to get the passive detection where we can for bikes, especially when they have a separated space, I think is really a good thing to try to do. For the cross-jurisdictional meeting, I'm happy to be an alternate if Ken can't make whatever time comes up. If there's anyone else who's particularly interested in attending.
I was going to nominate Ellen, but I don't know if she wants that nomination.
I was going to nominate Sarah. Honestly, I think anyone.
Yeah.
You guys would be great.
And if someone else would like to be the alternate to can or wants to be the primary, I'm totally open. Does not matter to me.
I have a pretty flexible daytime schedule, except for the first 2 weeks of January. So an alternate is a good idea.
Okay.
Frida, your comments made me feel like I needed to ask a couple more questions clarifying. We mentioned earlier a net loss, or Justin counted up a net loss of 19 parking spaces. I assume that that 19 parking spaces is the full extension of San Pablo north and south through Albany, but you counted 19 parking space loss.
That's for the Clay to Brighton zone that you asked
Clay
about.
to Brighton is 19 spaces. Okay, so the net loss is not counted yet. But I just wanted to point out that I'm hoping, I really hope that we can make this work for all users. And I know currently that the backup on Marin crossing San Pablo at certain times of the day, it goes all the way up to Masonic and beyond. And I would hope that none of these changes are going to extend that, because that will increase the frustration of drivers, and frustration of drivers will invariably result in risk to bicyclists and non-motorized vehicle users.
Pedestrians, yeah.
Pedestrians and others, yes. All of us who are vulnerable to cars. So I just hope that when we're planning these, and I haven't heard any discussion of how this will impact the flow of cars through the intersection. Talked about bikes, we've talked a little bit about pedestrians, but cars need to be part of the plan as well. So I just would ask you that question.
Yeah, so this project is not proposing any traffic signal timing or phasing changes at the San Pablo Marin signal that would affect traffic flow along Marin. The new pedestrian hybrid beacon at Keynes and Marin will stop traffic where there is not currently any kind of traffic control device. Right now, a pedestrian or a cyclist can cross at any time, and motorists are expected to yield. And so what installing the PED hybrid beacon means is that it can actually be interconnected with the San Pablo Marin signal. So you could, and this is what we were planning to do as part of the project, hold the pedestrian and bike crossing until they're crossing when there's not through traffic along Marin Avenue that would back up to the San Pablo Marin intersection. So it actually provides some ability to regulate the timing of those two intersections and how they work together that's not there right now.
Thank you.
So that was a good question. I will tack on a follow-up idea to that one, which is you mentioned trying to deal with the bike lane pinch point there. As you're doing that, take a look at the westbound lane utilization between Keynes and San Pablo on Marin. A lot of cars end up in the right lane, and cars cannot get to the left lane. And so then when the signal changes and one car stops to turn right, the signal detects that no one's going through and lets off the green prematurely when there's a bunch of people still in the queue trying to get through. If we got more cars going into the left lane rather than the right lane, first off, less crowding for people on bikes, but also I think more efficient use of the signal when it turns green to cross San Pablo. That might cut down on some of those queues. It's been a perpetual challenge, so I don't expect anything miraculous, but we'll always take a look at that one. If you can rebalance the lane utilization, that would be a big help there. Because right now the traffic lane on Marin kind of leads into the right lane. Most people feel like they have to lane change to go to the left lane. If it felt more like it was leading to the left lane, switch that paradigm, it might help.
I have, oh, are you done with your thoughts?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I have one more comment about that Keynes and Marin pedestrian crossing. We have a flashing light pedestrian crossing up at Marin and Talbot. It's existing, and it is very notorious for cars to not stop even when the lights are flashing. And so I would request that if we're going to put this median closure with bike and pedestrian refuge areas, that we also have like lighting and flashing lights in that. Can we put them on the median to have additional lighting, or is that does that have to?
The Keynes Marin intersection is
That's gonna
supposed
be
to have
flat.
the pedestrian hybrid beacon, so
Okay,
that's
that'll be part
basically
of it.
like half a traffic signal.
Okay, good, because,
traffic
yeah,
light.
whatever is at Marin and Talbot is not enough. So this needs to be more than that.
That's why this is getting upgraded, not just a flashing yellow, but a
Perfect.
red.
Good.
Good point. Okay. Any last thoughts? If not, we should at least take a vote to confirm who's going to be our representative and alternative for the meeting. Any,
I'd like to move that Ken McCruskey represent us at the meeting as asked for border projects update.
second?
I'll second that.
Very good.
You want to include you as the alternative in the motion?
Happy to do that.
I'll add that to the motion.
Put that on the second.
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 Right.
Third, fourth.
That's fine. Let's call the vote on this one, please.
Vice Chair Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Hiley,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner McCroskey,
Yes.
Commissioner Zuba,
Yes.
and Chair Javendal.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Move on to item 4-2. Okay.
Give a minute, or should we get going?
We can, anyone else needs to take a break, maybe we can continue. We still have quorum. Okay. Going, we have a lot to cover.
Great. Thank you. So there's a lot on this item to get through. I want to acknowledge that we did provide earlier today and circulate, and it's attached to the packet, additional information and addendum to the memo from Albany Fire Department. And note, if the commission needs, you are able to continue or defer the item if you're not ready to act on it tonight. But so tonight, with this presentation of analysis of a Solano Avenue bicycle facility concept, what we're looking for is policy direction on the active transportation plan. I'll emphasize it's not a design proposal. Really, these concepts have been developed to inform the policy direction we're seeking from the commission tonight and eventually from City Council. So I will do a little bit of the background, prior direction, and content from the staff memo. And we also have with us tonight Andrew Lee and Pete Rusitti from Parametrics to go through the content from the technical memorandum and the concept that was presented. So, brief review of background. There are a lot of uses on an 80-foot right-of-way on Solano Avenue, 60 feet curb to curb. It serves as a designated truck route from San Pablo East, a bus route also from San Pablo East with local service as well as Trans-Bay service. And it serves as a Main Street retail corridor with significant pedestrian activity from Madison east to the city border. It also has various characteristics across its segment, various levels of upgrades that have been done to date, with upgraded curb ramps for Madison to Masonic, upgraded streetscape work really done from San Pablo to Masonic previously, identified short-term accessibility upgrades and sidewalk pavement repairs. That's a upcoming capital improvement project. From Masonic to Tulare, identified additional streetscape improvements needed for that same corridor, and the roadway with similar characteristics continues into Berkeley outside of Albany jurisdiction. And just real quickly, there's sort of two components. We're looking for direction on what to designate or not for bicycle facilities on Solano. A lot of the content will be focused on what we see as the next needed streetscape project, which is Masonic to Tulare, but the more broad network connectivity question would be potentially applicable for a broader segment of the corridor. So as most of the commissioners are probably aware, the 2012 Active Transportation Plan did not designate Solano Avenue for dedicated bicycle facilities. It relied on Washington to the north and Marin and Dartmouth to the south for parallel facilities. Leading up to 2019 acceptance, there was work done on a complete street study, really looking at the Masonic to Tulare segment for future streetscape improvements. At the conclusion of that study and the acceptance of that study, there was direction to look at the potential for bicycle facilities on Solano as part of the Active Transportation Plan, which is now what we're doing. We brought some information on the rough concept on a prototypical block to give City Council some idea of the parking implications and other considerations that had been identified as part of this concept. And on May 5th, Council directed us to develop an uphill bikeway concept. So since that time, what we've been doing is collecting feedback, reviewing design guidance, developing the general concept and inventory of the estimated parking implications, and identifying areas that require further study, further evaluation. So just reporting a little bit that was included in the staff memo from our public engagement. We've did engagement on priorities and preferences for Solano Avenue in our Phase 2 network development workshop and online survey. We've also subsequently surveyed the businesses along Solano Avenue, and the online survey that we conducted with that also was distributed beyond businesses, so there's some non-business feedback we got from that as well, so reflecting both of those here. We looked at extension of Lower Solano, roughly keeping the existing parking and travel lane configuration, and compared that to this parking reconfiguration, turning the north side to parallel and the south side to a sharper angle parking, and with the reduced width of a parallel parking lane and the reduced need for the westbound travel lane, looked at what we could do with that for a one-way uphill cycling facility, as well as what could be done for pedestrian amenities for that to get priorities and feedback on that. And really the feedback we got, while surveys of this kind are not representative, they are a selective group of respondents. They do show a relevant preference amongst the businesses that responded for extending the Lower Solano configuration, and relatively even, tied for second preference beyond that between allocating more space for the bike or for pedestrian facilities. And non-business specific public responses showed a preference for the eastbound uphill bikeway, with the second preference being to extend Lower Solano over allocating for wider sidewalks. We also solicited feedback on what business owners' priorities for the corridor, for corridor improvements are, and those priorities included addressing parking and loading issues, lighting, improving street trees, and public art. And we did hear a lot from folks, and a number of considerations were raised, many which will require additional work to address, including parking and loading impacts of the concept, a lot of discussion of existing double parking and loading disruptions that are there today, and concern about a narrower westbound travel lane compounding that, concerns about the construction costs, and I'll note in the May presentation to City Council, we gave a rough order of magnitude estimate of streetscape improvements of this nature, really being in the range of $30 to $50 million. There were also some comments related to parallel parking challenges for some folks and worry about discouraging folks from visiting businesses. Concerns about motorists needing to walk across the bike path from parking spaces on the eastbound side with the reconfiguration. Some comments about the disparate impacts to parking and access on the north side of the street versus south side of the street with this scenario. Emergency response concerns, as well as broader reduced flexibility of roadway use. And here's where I'll note the addendum where we previously what was communicated to City Council from emergency response considerations was really the operational, how they would operationally need to change, and basically would be looking at potentially blocking the roadway in both directions and the frequency of calls and the disruption of that. And what they've conveyed in the memo we shared is really those operational concerns mean that they're asking for maintaining the width, the 15-foot width that they see as needing to access the sides of the vehicles when they're on a call safely without being in the opposing lane. So that is something that we would need to either incorporate or figure out if there are ways to address the operational components of that with future design development if this proceeds. And then some questions around one-way bikeway compliance and operational questions with providing a facility in one direction when there will be desire to travel in both directions. So that was a lot of feedback condensed, but wanted to give a sense of what we were hearing with all those one-on-one conversations, with survey responses, and some priority discussions we've had with folks. And with that, I'll hand it over to Pete to dive into some of the more details of the concept.
Justin, and I hope everyone can hear me okay. Good evening to members of the commission. It's good to see you all again. I know you've probably seen me a few times. I'm sorry that I could not be there in person tonight. But my name is Pete Rossetti. I am a transportation planner. I'm the project manager on the consultant side for the active transportation plan, which is the larger plan that we've brought before this body a few times and are in the final phase of right now. The work that we're doing right here and the concept that we're going over tonight was actually part of a separate task in our contract under the active transportation plan. So as the project manager of the overall project and as a planner, I've been helping out a lot with the screening of concepts, the preparation of the technical memo. But we also have with us tonight in person in the room, Andrew Lee, who is a civil and traffic engineer and who was the engineering design manager for the concept that we're going to go over tonight. So I'm going to cover some of the high level parts, going over the corridor and the concept. And then when we get into a little more of the nitty gritty, I'll turn it over to Andrew and he can go over some of that. And so dealing first with the concept overview that you see on the slide, like Justin mentioned, the project corridor that we looked at is from Masonic to Tulare, and it's about 3,300 feet. And you can see it there on the map. That map that you're seeing for context is the bikeway network map from the active transportation plan, which is still in draft form, but you can see the green and blue bikeways going through it. And then the section of Solano Avenue doesn't doesn't have any bikeways on it because that is part of the study that we're doing. I guess I should clarify the dashed line east of Curtis is the city limit line, which goes down the middle of the street. That is not a bikeway line. So as Justin mentioned, we went to council to screen several different concepts, and they wanted to know a little bit more about this concept and if this would be possible. This kind of was a series of concepts that we came up with to try to preserve as much parking as possible, stay within the curb to curb width as much as possible, so not to impact the ped or not to have to tear up the street too much, but to be able to provide some sort of benefit for biking and rolling and active transportation in general. So you can see the 3 goals written there. The goal really is to kind of balance and maximize space efficiency within the constrained right-of-way to serve multiple modes as best possible, to preserve a substantial amount of the on-street parking compared to what's out there now, and again, to try to preserve some, to try to provide some new benefits for active transportation users, which is something that we've heard loud and clear in the active transportation plan process and stakeholder outreach. So next slide, please. This is a bigger photo, or a bigger version of the cross-section that you saw on Justin's slide where it had the 4 across, and this is called the eastbound protected bikeway concept of those 4. And so we're going to zoom in a little bit on that. And the key there is that it features an asymmetrical bikeway and parking layout. So on the downhill side, on the westbound side, it would maintain as a shared lane. And that tries to take advantage of the higher downhill speeds that bikes are able to achieve. And then over on the eastbound side, we see a normal traffic lane, 60-degree angle parking, and a protected bikeway, which again, Andrew will talk about some of the design features more, but that's kind of a zoomed in version of the concept, and we're gonna dive quite a bit deeper into it as we go through. Next slide, please. Just a little bit kind of on the higher level planning side about this type of concept. We just wanted to provide some, there's a lot of context for this. It's not an ideal type of bikeway. Obviously, you would want to have protected bikeways on both sides, but the idea of kind of splitting the bikeway type in constrained streets and hilly areas where, again, on the uphill, I'm sorry, on the downhill, typical biking and rolling speed comes a little bit closer to that of cars, generally 15 to 25 miles an hour. And the speed limit on Solano is 20, so it falls squarely within that. But then on the uphill side, where many cyclists, especially those who are not using e-bikes, tend to go a little bit slower. The section of Solano that we're looking at has an average slope of 3% and a maximum slope in 1 or 2 parts of around 5 or 6%. That provides the physical separation there. And there's a few examples here. There's a few more examples in the technical memo, and I apologize. There's a couple yellow highlights there where we weren't able to get what I consider to be perfectly reliable traffic counts for those streets, but based on our knowledge of Polk Street in San Francisco and Fremont Avenue in Seattle and how those are used, those are believed to be well over 8 to 10,000, if not more. And so I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of context for some of the kind of urban or semi-urban village context that this type of asymmetrical bikeway can be used in. And if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to go through just a few slides looking at some of the design features. And we're going to walk through the westbound side and the eastbound side, and then talk a little bit about parking, loading, and transit. Andrew, if you're there, please take over.
Okay, yeah, I'm here. Good evening, Commissioners. Andrew Lee, Senior Engineer with Parametrics. I'm going to walk through the details of the design starting from the north side of the street in the westbound direction. And I think what's important to begin to frame this conversation is we're not trying to engineer down to the foot here. We are taking the curb-to-curb existing width, and we are taking industry standards for what is allowed for vehicle lanes, bicycle travel, parking, and we are showing that if we conform to the industry standard, is it possible to fit in a bicycle facility, a rolling facility for that matter, and what are the trade-offs that we're encountering here? So with that in mind, in the westbound direction, starting from the north side curb, we are looking at a parallel parking arrangement, which is a deviation from the existing configuration, which is angled parking, and we're assuming about 8 feet. And we wanted to go with an 8-foot assumed parking width because that westbound lane is going to be shared between people driving and bicycling. And so for a narrow parking space, that extra width, rather than a 7-foot, an 8-foot width, just helps that people parking position themselves, and there's still a bit of buffer room for people to open their doors. So we didn't want to go to a minimum width there. Now, for the 11-foot lane, that is perfectly within the standards for a busy street collector type facility here. But I will acknowledge that for a street with a pretty pronounced downhill slope, that it would be more comfortable, honestly, if it was wider, okay? And there is a bit of guidance about whether shared laned facilities, bike routes, where people biking and people driving are sharing the same facility, the guidance amongst NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, and AASHTO, American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, shared lanes are typically recommended for lower traffic volume streets, okay? So this is where we are recognizing that we are not conforming to the recommended practice for shared lane facilities. And so therefore, this westbound shared lane facility, we as engineers would not consider this to be one suitable for an all ages and abilities type of environment. It is primarily oriented for people with moderate to advanced bicycling skills who are comfortable traveling at a relatively high speed and being next to parked cars, some of which may be double parked, movements where there are people making deliveries, buses. It's a fairly complicated scenario, okay? But nonetheless, it is possible to fit in parallel parking, an 11-foot lane, and the remainder provides for opportunities on the other side of the street. I will also note that in order to fit this facility in, we find that the existing corner bulbs that are on the north side of Solano would need to be demolished, reconstructed, reduced in size because they are wider than the footprint of where the parallel parking would be. And I will acknowledge that that will increase the distance for people walking across Solano Avenue. Okay, so more to come later with that, but I think there's also a note here that parallel parking, it is better for the sightlines for people who are on the north side of the street attempting to come south, looking towards the east, that because the parked vehicles are no longer angled, that you can see oncoming traffic a little bit better. However, there is still the risk with the narrower lanes that and the reduced amount of parking on the north side that people trying to access the north side, making deliveries and the such, will be more inclined to double park sometimes. That will ultimately be driven by what kind of policy the city can choose to enact regarding enforcement and finding loading zones and whatnot. But in terms of design, this is where we landed. Next slide, please. Okay, in the uphill direction. So now that we've sort of laid out from the north to the south, we have a remaining amount of width from the 60-foot right-of-way. So we laid it out to be 16 feet for the eastbound travel lane. Then 14 feet for the angled parking, which is now from 45 degrees to 60 degrees. A 4-foot buffer between the parked vehicles and the bikeway is 7 feet. And so you may recognize that the buffer is actually wider than the minimum that's listed for separated bikeways. The minimum for a buffer next or with a parking is supposed to be 3 feet. And for the bikeway with a presumed 2-foot gutter, that minimum width for the bikeway per national standards and also state standards, the minimum is 5 feet, okay? So we have gotten tons of questions about, could you take 1 foot and send it here, make the sidewalk wider, make the vehicle lane wider? The purpose of the exercise, to frame again, is that we are taking relatively rigid constraints of the 60-foot curb to curb, and we fit in what is an industry standard. And where we landed between the 4-foot buffer and the 7-foot bikeway is we have about 2 feet of flexibility to work with. It's a safety factor that we're dealing with. And so rather than get into the details of can we make this lane wider or narrower, what we are showing here is that if we proceed into a further design phase, there will be inevitably things that we discover along the way in terms of utility conflicts, or maybe the curb-to-curb width actually is a little bit narrower based on the way it was constructed, or there's just some underground thing we're trying to avoid. And so, again, I just want to frame here that we're not trying to engineer down to the nearest foot, okay? Given all that, some of the things I want to call out. For one, on the south side curb, while we are not proposing to reconstruct the predominant curb line, all of the bulb outs on that south side, if we were to fit in a eastbound bikeway, would need to be constructed in some way. And I'm saying that sort of vaguely because the way that gets reconstructed can take many different forms. For one, we could just change that entire corner and send it into a roadway grade so that the bikeway comes along the curb and it does not rise, it just is at roadway grade, which means that the sidewalk would have a curb ramp that intersects at the bikeway, and then you proceed across Solano Ave. We could reconstruct that corner to be raised so that the people on bike will ramp up onto a raised facility. The bikeway itself technically could be raised if we were to embark on reconstructing that curb line. Has all kinds of costs and design implications. And one more thing, which is that we have not shown this at the corners, but we have received questions about what could you possibly do here. At the corner where you have the crosswalk and to the very first angled parking space, we are subject to several constraints. One is that there is state law about how close a parked vehicle can be to a marked crosswalk. And in fact, we have not marked the crosswalks here. The second thing is that we are subject to design vehicle, meaning the vehicle that the city makes policy to accommodate on Solano Avenue, typically the fire engines, in order to make these larger sweeping turns. So therefore, we have not drawn any sort of raised feature pedestrian refuge island because there's a lot of uncertainty there. And then lastly, one very important thing is that a lot of what drives what can go on with these islands is determined by how we design curb ramps, because these curb ramps need to be redesigned. And if we were to go with directional curb ramps that are designed to shorten the crossing distance for people walking, it tends to push farther into the mid-block sections of the street, meaning that it would likely reduce the amount of on-street parking that you could fit. But if you were to go with diagonal curb ramps, for instance, you could fit more parking in. So there's a trade-off here. The diagonal parking generally positions people walking and rolling across the street in a less advantageous way to cross the street. But if parking is an issue, then that is a trade-off we need to discuss and recognize. Lastly, for the 7-foot bikeway and the 4-foot buffer, it does provide for a possibility of something like a 10-foot clear space, which a street sweeper on the smaller side could fit without needing to go deep into like compact sweepers. And so that safety factor that I mentioned before also affords itself for street sweeping because these things get dirty and debris builds up. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I did mention this before, the pedestrian realm. On the north side, there are very large bulbs currently on Solano Avenue. They do serve the function of shortening the distance for somebody walking or rolling across Solano Ave, so the exposure to traffic is lessened. In this case, in order to fit in the vehicle lane with parallel parking, those corners, specifically on the north side, the westbound side, would need to be reduced in size. However, they could still remain as bulb outs. On the eastbound side, those curb extensions, for the moment, we are showing them to be removed. There is a possibility that they could be reconstructed to be what we sometimes call floating curb extensions, or essentially islands, which is that it's a raised feature that is situated between the bikeway and the vehicle lane in the shadow of the angled parked vehicle. And the exhibit on the bottom right there shows an example of that kind of configuration in Berkeley. Next slide, please. Okay, and then getting to the parking matter, because this is what was driving a lot of what we are trying to study in our constraints here. The whole question is, could you fit in a bicycle facility and minimize the change in the on-street parking, because it is a very sensitive use on the street? Right now, with the layout that we have, we counted approximately 184, well, it's not approximate, we counted 184 parking spaces. We did not differentiate between those being ADA spaces, loading spaces. They are simply counted as curb space that could be allocated any which way the city decides to make policy for. It is just potential space. And then with the design that reconfigures the lanes and the parking, we landed at 173 proposed or potential spaces, which constitutes a 6% loss in the parking supply. I would not fixate so much on the exact numbers, because I want to emphasize this is a matter of accuracy rather than precision. Meaning, I could see that basically we're within 10% of the existing parking here. If we get deeper into the design and look into the constraints and like, oh, there's a driveway, wow, this is really close, there's a fire hydrant, can't put one here. It could drop down to like 90% of existing. If we went a bit more aggressive in terms of the smaller design vehicle, or we went with diagonal curb ramps and we really tried to squeeze things in, we could be at or even above the existing parking supply. So I would constitute that our findings here show that you're going to be roughly around existing. We're not going to be redesigning this and then finding that it's like actually a 1/3 reduction, nor are we going to find that we're going to have this surplus of parking spaces. With this arrangement, we're probably pretty close to the existing configuration. With that, though, we did account for driveways, so we did not put parking spaces to block driveways. We also accounted for the bus stops. With regard to loading zones and ADA spaces, they may constitute a loss in the general parking use, but that is really driven by what could be city policy in terms of using the side streets, adding time of day restrictions, paid parking. I mean, there's all different ways that we can deal with this. But nonetheless, in terms of just where we landed with the space, we're pretty close to existing, okay? Next slide, please. Okay, and with the bus stops. The bus stops that we have shown here are consistent with AC Transit's guidance for the length of in-lane stops, meaning that right now this box that we've labeled bus stop is shown to be fairly vague, okay? We are not showing it as a curb extension, as a bus, a pull-in stop or any sort of island, but in terms of minimizing the amount of space that we need to accommodate a bus stop, having an in-lane stop is going to preserve more parking because you don't have to accommodate the bus pulling in and then back out. A pull-out kind of arrangement would result in more space that is currently shown as parking being allocated to bus pull-out zones. So in terms of efficiency, the trade-off is that, yes, the bus, as shown here, would be blocking the traffic behind it, including people on bikes in the westbound direction, but the parking count is going to be on the higher side. There is more work to be done in terms of what these islands look like, the drainage, the civil design, and also I will note that the parking analysis and the conceptual design does account for several bus stops being moved, or excuse me, removed as part of what was identified in the 2019 study. Okay, next slide, please.
Andrew, I think I can take this slide. I mean, if you really want
Please
to.
do, thank you.
But thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for walking through a lot of technical stuff. Wanted to give you a break there. This is just one final slide where we wanted to kind of conclude the technical takeaways. And then after this, there'll be a second slide. I'll turn it back over to Justin, who will discuss kind of some of the process next steps in terms of where the city may go from here in terms of their actual process. But from a planning and engineering, a technical standpoint, we just wanted to kind of summarize. Overall, the conceptual layout does align with applicable guidance, as Andrew, quite a few caveats there, but this is all broadly consistent. It really is a way to balance the multimodal desires with the parking. Like Andrew noted, we believe the specific parking number may change, but generally between maintaining the same amount of parking and losing maybe up to 10%. That's generally the band that we're going to be in, is 0 to negative 10%. So overall, that's quite a bit of preservation of parking for being able to also deliver a benefit of a protected bikeway. Like we mentioned, it does make the biking and rolling conditions better, particularly in the uphill direction. But it's not optimal in the downhill direction, and by bikeway guidelines would only be for the stronger, more confident riders because of the traffic volumes that are in the 8 to 10,000 range for this segment. There's quite a few things that do need further study, and it really kind of gets into, when we pull the string on actual design work, really getting a little bit deeper in the civil side of it. But as Andrew mentioned, the transit stop design, ADA parking requirements on both sides. So again, kind of what Andrew mentioned is how we designate that curb space, and that's also the next bullet, loading management and loading zone needs. The curb space can be managed in terms of how it's allocated permanently, how it's allocated at different times of the day, and that's kind of more of a policy decision for the city. So thinking through a little bit of how the curb space could be managed is definitely part of this. Some of the civil design pieces, especially pertaining to intersections, are things we need to look into more. We did receive a comment about the potential to have some of the curb extensions or the floating islands in there, like Andrew showed a photo of. So looking at the potential to kind of add those back in, and if there's room for that. A little bit more development of the traffic operations at Masonic and Key Route, that kind of 3-way, 4-way intersection there, and whether there needs to be space allocated for the left turns, it's westbound left turns onto southbound Masonic, and if a left turn pocket is needed there, or a double left, or whether we can preserve some of that width for parking on Solano. So again, just a little bit more detailed design work has to be done to figure that out, including traffic ops. And I think, like Andrew had on his slide, the Tacoma intersection, which is at quite a acute angle, also has a bus stop there that we were looking at removing. Kind of, noted here that that's going to take a little more civil and traffic design as well to figure that out. And it was beyond the time and the budget that we had for this very conceptual level study. Finally, I think Andrew or Justin mentioned the needs for fire and first responders and some of the transportation needs that they have. They just gave us some comments about it, so we do want to be able to think through those and discuss those in the next stages of project development. And then finally, green infrastructure, green streets, and other things like that may be required as part of the engineering and drainage and civil. Okay, that was a whole bunch of stuff from the consultant team. Happy to turn it back to Justin to kind of wrap up next steps process-wise, and then we'll be available for questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew and Pete. And so just to wrap us up here, reemphasize what Pete said. We are really at the end of the scope that we have for this under the active transportation plan, and we're recommending that the commission consider a recommendation to council. And just to try to be clear on how staff sees this, a recommendation to include Solano Avenue in the ATP bicycle network. We would be then looking for bicycle facilities being incorporated in a Solano streetscape improvement project for the Masonic to Tulare stretch in the ATP project list, which is our next phase, along with pedestrian and bicycle crossing improvements, and identifying in that what the next steps are for developing the concept that's been presented. And I think in my staff recommendation in the memo, I also said if there is feedback on what the commission really sees as a priority for next steps for us to work on for this, happy to hear those tonight as well. And then a recommendation to exclude the Solano Avenue from the ATP bicycle network. We've really presented in our engagement with folks 2 scenarios on what to do with that. One being to basically bring lower Solano cross-section, angled parking on both sides, existing travel lanes eastward, and really focusing on bicycle and pedestrian crossing improvements with that. And then the other being what we were presented of, taking this parking configuration that we've been looking at that preserves most of the parking and using the width that's gained from that for pedestrian sidewalk facility expansion, as well as then the intersection crossing improvement. So really see sort of in terms of what we've engaged folks on, those as the two scenarios that we would then be looking for guidance on which to proceed with if the recommendation is to not have Solano Avenue in the bike network. And with that, I will look to any questions from the commission.
Any commission questions?
Question. So you outlined a few of the major themes of concerns that people have had with moving forward with this plan. And one of them is, this concern about people having to cross the bike lanes to access the car parking on the eastbound, and then also having to cross the bike lane for for pedestrians crossing the street, or just people who are kind of moving in and out of the stores. And I wanted to ask, we aren't the first city who is designing a plan like this. I feel like there's a lot of examples that we can pull from. And so even some locally, I know in Oakland, there's on Telegraph, there are areas where the bike lane is protected, and you even have to cross the bike lane to access parklets where you can eat at a restaurant that's on that side of the curb. So I would just like to ask, what has your experience been, or what does the literature show, and local experiences been with these types of projects? Are you seeing that is an issue that is a valid issue that we should be considering and thinking about? Or is this something that seems like it might be an issue, but in reality, it's not really something that comes up a lot, or we've seen conflicts or collisions of pedestrians and bicyclists at these intersections?
If Andrew or Pete has any feedback on that, I'm happy to jump in as well.
Yeah, I can comment on that just a little bit. I guess I can't claim to have a extensive knowledge of that. In my experience as an active transportation planner and kind of the state of the practice, not really heard of that as an issue that's been flagged as a major concern. Obviously, there's concerns with any sort of a conflict zone, one mode and another. Generally, bikes are going at relatively slow speeds. I know e-bikes change that these days, although one thing that's a mitigating factor is that the protected bikeway on this side will be on the uphill side, so that's going to slow things a little bit. As currently designed, it is not at the curb level, but it's actually at the street level, so a pedestrian would need to actually kind of step down into off of the curb into the street more. So hope that that would provide kind of a physical or a visual cue to not step out into a place like that before you look, to make sure that it's clear. For areas though where the bikeway is kind of at the same level as the sidewalk, there's lots of different types of visual treatments you can do to kind of signal to folks that they're stepping into a conflict zone, whether that's paint or some landscaping, some sort of kind of a barrier that people can walk through, but that kind of notes that this is a separate area. And so I know I think there's quite a few mitigations you can put in place for that. And in my experience, I'm not aware of this being flagged thus far as a particularly troublesome issue. But again, there's always some level of risk there.
Yeah, I think Pete hit on most of it. This kind of facility is reliant on people having some courtesy when using it, honestly. The design will handle the concerns of most of the people walking and rolling through the street, particularly because of the uphill direction, having a slowing effect on people in the rolling lane. But there will be instances of people choosing to go westbound in this facility, and there will be instances of people just not behaving courteously. And these are simply just risks that we have to acknowledge and try to manage one way or another. But I cannot say that this facility is going to be 100% not subject to that kind of behavior. It is something that we have to deal with simply as being people in society and living around other people and understanding that some people tend to not follow the rules so much. But nonetheless, the features that Pete mentioned will serve to mitigate a lot of these concerns, possibly even make it a less unsafe facility compared to one that is perfectly level because of that difference in travel speed.
Thank you. I have one more question kind of along that same vein of just addressing the concerns that have been coming up during this planning process, which are related to the parking. And I know that there's been a lot of work that to minimize the parking loss, so I hope that those concerns have been mitigated. But I wonder if you can kind of speak again to the experiences of, again, we're not the first city who is maybe losing a few parking spots or changing the parking structure of a business area to make improvements on active transportation and bike facilities. So again, is this something that, when cities are adding in bike infrastructure and maybe losing a few parking spots, do they see a significant impact on the businesses that are there? Or is this, does it kind of end up in the wash because of, more movement with bikes and all of this other stuff that's happening? Like, is that a concern that we should be considering?
Yes. That is a hotly debated topic. There's definitely a wide variety of views on that. Active transportation advocates will note that a lot of research shows actually that making a commercial village street safer for bikes and peds and more encouraging for them tends to increase foot traffic and tends to increase local business. I know a lot of local businesses would say maybe they don't feel that that's true, or it really depends on what type of customers you cater to, and if the type of business that you have, maybe people tend to drive to it more because they have to carry things from it, or any number of reasons. So it's kind of difficult to say. That said, we did, like you mentioned, really try to preserve the parking as much as possible. That was something that we heard loud and clear. It's something the council heard loud and clear, and had, I think, challenging time to really try to balance these modes and try to balance all of those concerns. So I would say there's not a definitive answer from research or data to say what the effect will be. One thing I would like to note also, and this is something that we've heard in some of the outreach, is not so much necessarily what the end state is, but the length and disruption level of the construction period often can be very impactful. So even if you have a business and you want the future streetscape to be great and have the bikeways and make everything really nice. If that's going to take many, many years and cause a lot of disruption, that's another concern that we've heard in terms of the kind of interim phase of that. So that's something, again, it's not necessarily within the scope of what we were looking at, but in terms of the ability to plan things out and really try to deliver the project as quickly as possible. And like Andrew mentioned, part of the guidance we got from council was to not disturb as much curb line as we could, because tearing up the curbs then affects the drainage inlets, and then you have to rebuild the whole street. We weren't able to do it at the bulb outs, like Andrew covered quite extensively, but really trying to keep it within the curb to curb and focus on striping and things like that more than a big extensive project that would tear up the whole street.
I'll just add a little bit more nuance from the business feedback side of it, not to counter the studies that were referenced, but the nuance and responses I got from business one-on-ones was there were a subset of businesses that were saying the nature of my business, like I'm selling very large things, or I'm selling to a broad section of the region. A lot of my customers are coming from farther away. They're not going to shift mode to come here. So I did definitely hear that from a number of businesses that, we can't rely just on the local service area. We need the vehicle traffic access to maintain our business. And then the second component, I guess, that I heard was I'm competing with someone in another area that has parking mall kind of, or lot of parking abundance, and nervousness about, at what point does it get tight enough here that my customer just doesn't come because of that? So those were two components in the one-on-ones I'd just share as additional detail on that.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Can I follow on that? So when we look at this part of Solano Avenue, what I call Uptown, we're really looking at a larger project overall to upgrade the street and the storm drains. And what is the projected cost of that?
We don't have a lot of detail on different scenarios of costs, but essentially the high-level cost estimate we did was for full streetscape work, not changing curb lines on either side, probably closer to the 30 million side of the range, and moving curb lines, level of reconstruction work associated with that, more towards the 50 million. But in terms of one scenario, different costs, we don't have the information.
It's a wide range, but thank you. That's yeah. So there's this larger project, an upheaval that is expected, and this is a subset of that. With that understanding, it sounds like there's some difference up to how much upheaval depending on moving the curbs or not. Okay, thank you.
So regarding the I guess the fire department addendum, I was wondering where do the 15 feet, where does that number come from? And also kind of like a follow-up, Andrew talked about a lot of the design constraints that they considered, and while there's flexibility in them, I'm sure that this type of thing was probably considered in those. So I'm wondering what is the actual code requirement and where this 15 feet comes from?
Yeah, my understanding is this is not a code requirement. In terms of the width of a travel lane needed, 11 feet is sufficient for the largest fire vehicle to travel down the lane. What this comes from is their operational needs in responding to calls. And we're a small department. The larger vehicle is part of our emergency response to a call, even if it's not a fire call. They do need to access equipment from the sides of the vehicles. So when they're responding to a call, it's not an 11-foot need if they need to safely access the sides of their vehicles. So that's where the wider need comes from. What was communicated earlier was operationally, this might mean they need to basically block the street if they don't have that within one travel lane, one side of the street, and potential disruptions in the frequency of that. What they've communicated and what we shared in the addendum was that because of those operational concerns, at this point, they're asking us to maintain the 15-foot westbound lane so they don't have to do that. But it would need to go, in further design, we would need to work further, are there other ways we can address their needs that doesn't require them to fully block? Aside from what they've asked for, is 15 feet really what we need to design around? What the implications of that we would have to explore further.
So you might not know now, but maybe just something to think about is wondering like how often those types of calls come out where they do need to access the side of it. So yeah, wondering about the frequency, and then also wondering why this might be too nitty-gritty for like this level of discussion, I'm aware, but why there's a constraint of like crossing the center line, if that can possibly.
So in terms of the frequency, I think it was provided in there, but based on a look at prior 3 years of calls that we did in advance of the May council discussion, came to approximately, I think it was 1.7, something like that, calls per week. In terms of them needing to respond to a call on Solano Avenue. In terms of crossing the center line, my understanding, it's a safety of, their staff, and it's clear when they're blocking one travel lane, but if they're needing to be in the opposing travel lane, there's safety concerns there and need for traffic management potentially, or if they are concerned about it, do they just block both lanes of traffic, and we need more traffic management to divert traffic in response to that. So that's where my understanding of where the concern comes from.
Okay, thanks. And more specifically, I was wondering, like, of those 1.7 calls per week, how much would need that 15 feet to access the side of it? I'm assuming that different types of calls require different use of the
I don't have information on distinguishing when they need access or not.
Okay.
Other questions?
I guess I just want to follow up on that line of discussion a little bit. In the report that we got from you guys, and thank you very much, it was a comprehensive report, you made a sort of a passing reference to emergency vehicles, and I just wonder, are fire trucks in other cities different sizes, or why would you not have addressed the 15-foot requirement in the report itself? Just curious about why that would have not been mentioned.
It comes down to, the source is not from design guidance or code requirements. It's come as feedback from our fire department.
Well, I guess my point is, fire truck is a fire truck. So I would think there would be some uniformity across jurisdictions.
The fire code standard is 20 feet for a fire lane, and that's supposed to address standard width of a fire truck or ambulance. Mirror to mirror is 10 feet, so two of them could pass each other. If there's a fire hydrant or need to potentially fight a fire at a building that's 3 stories or higher, the state fire code extends the fire lane width to 26 feet. And that gives them the extra working room. That's still 13 feet per lane, so our 15 feet, just kind of operationally, we seem to like using that. And I don't dispute the concerns, but it doesn't trace back to a specific fire code requirement that I've ever seen anywhere. So that's why it's not going to be in the standard traffic engineering report, because it's a City of Albany operational need.
Thanks, that helps.
Do you have one more question? regarding the statistic about the business engagement and the preference of the lower Solano versus, the three options, I'm wondering what was actually presented as options for the protected bikeway to businesses? Like what did they get to see as that option being presented that might have like influenced or, potentially made the decision a certain way?
I can pull up the slide. The visual in the slide was essentially what was part of that survey.
While Justin's pulling that up, it was essentially at the cross-section level, so it wasn't that kind of plan view or the whole corridor rolled out. It was the cross-section of what kind of the 3D photo, and there were four different images. I think Justin's pulling it up now. And there was also, Justin, I'm sorry to jump in on you there, but
please do.
there was also a kind of a screening matrix below where we kind of gave a plus, plus, minus, minus to different factors like bikes, heads, traffic flow, costs, things like that. That was underneath this. That was the context.
Okay, thanks. So some of the ways that you guys mentioned that parking was considered and prioritized in certain decisions, or could be, was that communicated in the outreach as being an option for the protected bikeway?
We communicated the rough 5 to 10% estimate of cost implications that we had from the May initial block work.
Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, I have a quick question. There was a few years ago some interest in doing back and angle parking on Solano Avenue. And the traffic engineers we consulted with at the time said there's back and angle parking doesn't work very well if you get above a certain amount of traffic. And what I recall is if you're at 8 to 10,000, what's the acronym at the end of that? Average daily
Traffic.
ADT. If we're at 8 to 10,000, the problem is it's hard to back up because there's so much traffic behind you. So looking at all this, that strikes me as being a similar problem for parallel parking, because I've been on crowded city streets in San Francisco, and if you line yourself up to parallel park and somebody's right on your rear bumper, you can't park. So you just drive around Chinatown for an hour looking for a place to park. Except my brother-in-law who grew up in San Francisco, he always finds places in Chinatown. Anyway, so was this a consideration in your plans that if we do parallel parking on the north side of the street, that we are beyond the ADT average day? ADT is beyond the recommended level for parallel parking?
We certainly recognize that parallel parking is going to be hard on Solano, but in that it's already a busy street and you end up backing into the street with an angled parking configuration. It was just one of those trade-offs of, yes, it will be worse, but you will result in a uphill protected bikeway. It is not as though we said it's not going to be an issue at all. Like, we recognize it is going to be an issue, along with the other issues of potential double parking and loading and reduced parking on the north side compared to the south side. So it is just simply a matter of the trade-off. But it does not constitute a safety problem, is what I would say. It is an inconvenience, possibly a very large inconvenience for some people, but it is strictly within the standards of acceptable engineering practice for traffic engineering that parallel parking on a busy street, yes, not optimal, but still allowed.
Thank you.
I've got a question, which is really probably just asking your opinion. With respect to parallel parking, standard parking space length in a commercial district is 22 feet. If we make the spaces longer, we potentially lose some spaces unless the length of the block just happens to be one where you were already 5.5 spaces. Well, let's just make it 5 bigger spaces. Then it's easier to pull in forward or just easier to parallel park. Is that something that you think we could look at without losing more than a couple % parking spaces, or?
Well, we're at 6% right now, so I would gander that maybe it'll tip us over to the 10% mark.
Okay, so in other words, if the difficulty of parallel parking becomes such a concern, there is a potential way of addressing it at the cost of giving up a few more parking spaces.
This is true.
Again, as you say, it kind of comes down to trade-offs, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You could charge for parking, and then
We haven't yet. That's a whole, yeah, no, not part of tonight's discussion, not on the agenda. That could be a future mitigation, who knows? Okay,
Nobody on the dais said that.
No. We are not prepared to discuss that. Any questions before we go to public comments and questions? Okay. Yes. Indeed. How long would you like to extend it?
I would like to propose, do you think 30 minutes? Do you think we're going to be more than that? 40?
10 o'clock?
40 minutes? Yeah, to 10 o'clock?
Start with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Propose that we extend the meeting to, by 30 minutes to 10 o'clock.
Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. No one opposed? Okay, that passes. Let's continue with public comment then. Anyone wishing to speak, come on up. Or do we have? Well, we can take comments here and then we'll go to online. Please.
Thank you for making this presentation, and I have several concerns, but two that I mainly want to address because I only have 3 minutes, and that is the bike lane between the cars and the sidewalk. That seems to me to be a disaster waiting to happen, and none of the little pictures that showed you how successful this is in other cities showed a bike lane between the cars and the sidewalk. And people getting out of their cars, especially parents with children, they have to get the stroller ready, they got to get the kids in, then they got to wait for bikes to go by, and who has the right of way? Does the pedestrian, who normally does have the right of way, or does the bike who's zooming down the way and not wanting to stop, which is understandable because when they're going uphill and they stop, then it's hard to get started again. So that's really serious, and I think people with disabilities who get out of their car and then have to try to cross that lane, there's going to be accidents, and that really concerns me. The other area that concerns me is just the whole project in general. Looking at, my opinion, the fiasco that happened with the bikeway on Keynes and Adams Street. That was put together so quickly. There were so many people against it, but it went forward anyway. When it was instituted, there was no signage. The way the city addressed that issue was taking the sign down that said one way. Now people are supposed to know it's 2-way. It's been 3 years since that, and I can come out of my driveway legally. I'm on Adams, and turn south and go out. I can do that. And I still, 3 years later, people coming north will pull in the middle of the street, they'll honk their horns, flash their lights, and tell me I'm going the wrong way. Nobody was notified sufficiently. And if this project goes forward, and it's on a much, much grander scale, if the public is not really informed, and if it's not done safely, it's going to be chaos, and people are going to get injured, and then the city's going to be liable for that. So those are my two big concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to ask a question right now, or no? No?
Need clarification?
Clarification. is that zone that is the 4 feet between the parking, the angled parking and the bike lane, is that going to be space that's usable for people to load and unload their cars, or what will that space look like? Is it elevated, or is it at the same height as the bikes? Am I allowed to ask that?
I was thinking clarification from the person who made the comments.
Oh, okay.
We'll follow up with the answers later.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Any additional public comments? Please come on up.
Hi. So I just had a few thoughts. I grew up in Albany, and I live here again, and Solano is awesome. I walk there all the time. If it's a little bit too far and I don't have enough time, I'll drive and park, but it's annoying to park on Solano because there's not that much space. But I also bike, so I like the idea of a bike lane, but I also am not sure how necessary it is on Solano. I do think that, I probably would use it if it was there, but I do think it would really change the character of the street. So I think it's something that really needs to be thought about a lot, especially with how it's designed, because the point of a bike lane on Solano would be so that people can get to Solano on their bikes and be on Solano and go to the businesses, and not use it as a throughway, right? We already have a throughway on Marin and we have a throughway on Washington. So I think there might be some other opportunities for how to get bikes to Solano. If there is going to be a bike lane on Solano, I think the design does make sense to me from a safety perspective. But I also think if we do it, we need to balance car parking with bike parking, because it's already hard to park your car on Solano. It's also hard to park your bike on Solano. So if there's going to be a bike lane and you're going to be encouraging people to bike there, there needs to be easy places for people to actually park their bikes so that they can use Solano. I also have some concerns about the idea of widening the crossing distance. It's already difficult to cross Solano. People already don't stop. So the idea of not having any crosswalks, I'm not sure if I heard that correctly, but I think that's a really big problem to not have crosswalks on crossing Solano. And maybe there are some other ways, if there is a bike lane, to make the crossings safer for pedestrians. Maybe something like raised crosswalks or something like that would slow bicyclists down. And on the issue of how businesses are going to be impacted after a reconstruction, I'm just wondering if maybe we can look at how Lower Solano is doing since it was redone, and how well the businesses seem to be doing or not doing. To me, it seems like since they were redone, Lower Solano's thriving, and Upper Solano seems to be a lot more dead than it used to be when I was growing up. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker. Come on up.
Thank you, everybody, for your presentations and being here and being part of the commission. It's a really important job. And I, as an Albany citizen for a long time, am very appreciative of your efforts. However, I am not for the bike lane on Solano for several reasons. It makes it more difficult for seniors, people with kids, doing errands where you're picking up packages, people coming from outside of the area are, like Walnut Creek, or, coming over for the day, or San Ramon or San Francisco. They're not likely to say, oh, let me take my bike from Walnut Creek, or let me drive from Walnut Creek Park and then go 10 blocks on Solano. This just doesn't make sense to me. We have Washington, we have Marin, they're thoroughfares. If someone is physically able to ride a bike up Washington, they should be physically able to go over a block to Solano to their destination. That should not be a problem. And you look at people who are seniors, people who are disabled, people who have kids, it just makes it really harder. And I think that this lady here brought up a good point. And that lady there, when you have people getting out of their cars and you have 2 or 3 kids, it's like kids kind of do what they want to do. I'm getting out of my car, you know, I'm going to just go, and there's the bike lane. I can just see that as being a disaster. So, and then when the gentleman said something about 30 million, we are in a time where funds are being cut back. We are looking at what we can do more for less. And we're going to spend 30 million on a bike lane when we have Washington and we have Marin. That does not make sense to me as a taxpayer. You cannot tell me that I'm going to get value for my money. You cannot tell me that it's going to be easier for people to shop on Solano. And this gentleman over here, when talking about parallel parking, I'm right there with you. I'm in my 70s. I hate parallel parking with a vengeance. I do park by the senior center on Masonic, and, you know, I like that there are nice big spots, but I could see being on Solano as being different and more stressful to do it. And I could see businesses being impacted. You know, if you're just going in to get a cup of coffee, you can go on your bike for 10 blocks, have a lot of fun, that's great. But a lot of us get groceries for the week. We might buy bulk goods. We might go to a dry cleaner. We're not going to do it on a bike. And I haven't ridden a bike since I was in my 50s. So not going to start now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Before we go to the online comments, let me just get a clarification on that 30 million. That was for the storm drain project or for the bike lane project?
That was high-level estimate for full streetscape, not just bike lane component, but sidewalks, road reconstruction, drainage, lighting.
Okay.
30 to 50.
30 to 50 high-level range, depending on how much we're changing.
So similar to the level of work that was done on Lower Solano, which was utility work, and we fixed the streetscape while we were at it.
That's correct.
All right, that's to know. Thank you. All right, let's go to online.
I'm sorry, one more thing I'd like to add, and I'm sorry about this. The San Rafael-Richmond Bridge had a bike lane.
Yes.
It got taken away because data showed that it wasn't used to the extent they were thinking it would be used.
Thank you. That's off topic, and you've had your comment, period. And many of us have heard about the bike lane on the bridge. They wanted a breakdown lane for safety. That's not applicable here. Let's go ahead to the online comments.
We have several. Brian Martin, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to thank the city for this presentation and for the commission for considering this. I applaud the consultants for really focusing on the parking there and the bicycle facility, to actually incorporate a bicycle facility that barely impacts parking. I've heard concerns from the public tonight about people driving from far away that they need a place to park, and it sounds like you have cracked the code on that one. It sounded like there might even be extra parking spaces depending on how things are additional parking spaces than there are now, or a modest loss considering all the changes that are proposed on the street. That's really great to see. I did have a question about the parking on the eastbound direction. One of the tables said that the number of spaces would be increased by 24, going from 80 now to 104 as your estimate for one of the ways to configure things. And so my question, maybe you addressed this, but I didn't notice, is where are those coming from? Whereas the other side has a decrease that's comparable. And then I think pedestrian crossings are important. I think sweating the details is important. And the conflict zones, I appreciate that people are thinking about those where pedestrians and bikes could potentially clash. And there are a lot of these around the areas now. And I do appreciate what commissioners were saying. You know, we're not completely reinventing the wheel. There are some, probably some things that are specific to this area, but there's a lot that's already known out there. And so if you can bring in information about that in your presentations to even a greater extent, that's good. I do urge the Transportation Commission to vote to include Solano Avenue in the ATP bicycle network. And I think I really do look forward to seeing how this can be fleshed out going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Hi. As far as parking, remember that there's still plenty of parking on side streets. I live a half a block off Solano, and people park on my block to access Solanovian businesses all the time. So there's plenty of that parking. You don't have to park right in front of your business. And if you must park in front of a particular shop, then we should add some more ADA spots, because those are the people that really have to park in front of the business. Remember that if shopper A can now bike to get her haircut and diner B can ride to a pub or something because they both feel safe riding their bikes, then there'll be fewer people vying for those specific car parking spaces anyway. So safer routes mean that fewer people will absolutely have to drive. There'll be more people that don't feel the need to drive. Regarding riding on Washington or Marin to do your particular businesses, to do your business, I'm a senior and I ride to do most of my shopping and business. I ride and I do multiple errands. I'm not going to ride up Washington, then cut across a block away to one business, then cut across to Marin, then cut back up on Marin, then cut back over to go to another shop. I mean, we could just as easily ask drivers to do that same thing. So there's no reason we should ask cyclists in particular to do that. Remember that per the Albany's Climate Action Adaptation Plan, we really must reduce our motor vehicle miles traveled. So in order to do that, we really have to make it safer and more comfortable for people to do business on Solano Avenue. That includes seniors, that includes kids riding to go get a burrito or an ice cream. In addition to Telegraph, which one of the commissioners mentioned, College Avenue in Oakland is really similar to Solano in the types of businesses that it has, the restaurants, the proximity to residential areas. They have bike lanes on both sides, in both directions. The least we can do is provide one-way uphill. If you stand on Solano for 5 minutes, stand by Solano and the Greenway, and you'll see so many people on various modes of mobile devices. You'll see them on traditional bikes. You'll see them on cargo bikes with kids, their long tails, with their kids in their packages. You'll see people on adult trikes. You'll see recumbents. So all these people, all ages and abilities, they really do want to ride, and they do ride here in Albany. So please, I appreciate you guys making it easier and safer to access Solano Avenue. All it has to offer for everybody here in Albany and everybody visiting Albany. Thank you very much.
Thank you. More speakers online?
Ian McLeod.
Good evening again. It's an interesting discussion. Thank you for all the different points of view and all the options considered. I would absolutely urge you to continue this into the ATP. I think it's absolutely essential. We absolutely want to increase our bicycle mode share. I support the bike lane, protected bike lane on one side of the street. In fact, I think you don't go far enough. I absolutely think you don't go far enough. There should be protected bike lanes on both sides of the street. With parallel parking on both sides of the street. If you did that, you could easily have your 15-foot travel lanes in both directions, 10-foot sidewalk, 5-foot bike lane, 3-foot buffer, 7-foot parking, parallel parking, 15-foot travel lane. You could easily do it. If the emergency access is your main concern, that would be an excellent way to do it. That's your priority, and I think that would also prioritize our active transportation plan and actually would get more people to Solano Avenue. I think the misconception here is that by providing a bike lane, you're going to reduce the number of people that comes to Solano Avenue. I think that's completely false. If you have really attractive cycling network with protected bike lanes, you will get more people to Solano Avenue and more shoppers. And I really want to push back against the idea that you can't shop on your bike. I'm 65 years old. I go to the grocery store with my cargo bike, and I put 4 bags of groceries or 5 on my cargo bike, and I ride home. I go to Flowerland. I buy plants and supplies at Flowerland, and I take them home on my bike. I mean, it's absolutely false to say that you cannot shop on your bike. I'm not saying everybody has to. Nobody says everybody has to. There will still be plenty of parking places for those who need it. As one speaker just mentioned, the more bike riders there are, that takes away the pressure on the car parking. You're trading off car parking for more bicyclists that arrive to shop and make it a thriving place. I mean, you can see it where it happens, and there are studies, and it's happening. There are examples all over the world where more people come to your shopping districts when it's an attractive, safe place to come by bike. And the car parking is still there. Nobody's saying they aren't going to be there. There's still going to be ADA parking. There's still going to be loading zones. I think it's about a better urban environment, really creating a better urban environment. Safer, more pleasant, green, more bikes, it's quieter, it's safer, a whole host of reasons why we should be doing protected bike lanes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Lucinda Young.
Yes, thank you. This is Lucinda Young. I'm an Albany resident. I'm also a member of the Albany Climate Action Coalition. I want to thank you so much for the presentation. I think an incredible job has been done of balancing all the various interests here and coming up with a way to provide a safer biking infrastructure without reducing parking. So I really commend you for that. I want to, as a member of the Albany Climate Action Coalition, I want to remind all of you that the highest source of our greenhouse gas pollution is transportation. Over 50% of our current greenhouse gas pollution is transportation, the vast majority of which is cars, single cars. And in addition to greenhouse gas pollution, also a significant source of our air pollution. And our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan directs a 25% reduction in passenger vehicles miles traveled. We also have a climate emergency declaration that our city council passed last year, and it directs the city to set policy and assign resources through the lens of climate action, coordinating across all departments and functions to ensure an effective, timely transition off of fossil fuels. So I see this decision to include a bicycle infrastructure along Solano Avenue as simply an implementation, an important implementation of our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, of our Climate Emergency Declaration, and our Active Transportation Plan. I also want to echo what Ian McLeod just spoke about. I am a senior as well. I'm going to be 69 next week. My primary mode of transportation is bicycle. I do have a car and I do at times drive, and I also walk quite a bit. I do all of my grocery shopping. I go to pick up dry cleaning, all on bicycle. So it is absolutely incorrect that if you are a senior that you you're not able to bicycle. I also want to call out the statement that if you're disabled, you can't bicycle. I have a very good friend who has MS, and it is his primary mode of transportation. He has a lot of trouble walking, but he can bicycle. And there are many adaptive bikes now. So these statements that were made earlier by a speaker are simply incorrect. I also just want to mention that I was on Solano Avenue just tonight for dinner, and in the block, it's about 5:30, and in the block I was in, there were 4 vacant parking spaces. There is ample parking on Solano, and I commend this plan that will allow us to not significantly reduce it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Albert Kotke.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Albert Kotke. I'm a parent of 2 young kids. Our family uses bikes as our primary way of getting around the city. We bike to work, we bike to the grocery store, to the library, to the flower shop, all the neighborhood shops, and the list goes on and on. For us, bikes lanes are really essential infrastructure that makes everyday life possible and safe. As numerous people have said, there are studies that show that well-designed protected bike lanes reduce injuries for all road users, people biking, walking, and driving, while also improving traffic flow. And they tend to increase retail sales by making streets more inviting and accessible. The current design of Solano Avenue lacks safe bike lanes, limiting access for our family to the shops that we frequent. The challenge is just not getting to Solano, but also traveling along it to visit multiple shops or getting to shops in the center of the blocks. It seems like the asymmetric design balances the needs of all users. And as Lucinda just mentioned, supporting bikes and walking is really critical for the future of our city and a livable earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Nicholas Bouet-Letourneau.
Hi, thank you. I'm Nicholas Bouet-Letourneau. I'm the father of 3 young children and live 2 blocks off of Solano. Once again, like many others have spoken, our primary mode of transportation around town is by bicycle. I am one of those you see with too many kids packed into a cargo bike. And I would just like to echo a lot of what everybody has just said. Lucinda, Ian, and Albert all spoke very eloquently about the desire for having robust and wonderful bike infrastructure in our city. I also believe that to what Ian was talking about, that like there is further to go, and like I would be a proponent of having protected bikeways in both directions on Solano, and it would increase my usage of this corridor. And I like as been mentioned over and over again, the reduction in the current plan of parking is in a low margin of error type situation, and so it seems like the concerns of those that are worried about parking has been well addressed. And I would encourage us to move further in the direction and go -10, -15, -20 if it helped improve the bike infrastructure even further. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Maxwell Gara.
I want to thank the commission for this discussion. Again, I'm Max Gara, resident of Albany, and I strongly urge the Albany Transportation Commission to recommend the inclusion of Solano on the ATP bicycle network to ensure that bicycles are considered as part of any Solano streetscape upgrade. I'm a father of a 5-year-old, and my family and I visit Solano Avenue multiple times a week, either by walking or bicycling, and we would, of course, visit Solano much more frequently if we felt safer as a family biking along this corridor. When we do find ourselves biking on Solano, we're often contending with drivers aggressively pushing us off the road or dangerously trying to pass us, and adding protected bike lanes to Solano would improve our safety and the safety of other road users. And rather than being seen as a challenge for businesses, bike lanes should be seen as an economic opportunity for the corridor. And as the consultant mentioned, study after study has demonstrated that improving bike infrastructure can have a positive impact on businesses. And it's also really wonderful to see the consultant's study of how many how many parking spaces would be reduced, which was very limited at 6% plus or minus 5. And I know it's taboo, but parking management should be also considered, including metering in any future study as well for Solano. I'll just echo that Albany has missed several consequential opportunities for improving safety of pedestrian and cyclists in recent years, including along San Pablo and Solano. And I'm asking the commission not to make this mistake again for the safety of myself and my family. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Catherine.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I'm speaking here because as an individual, not on the Planning Committee. I serve on the CAC as well, separately. I want to appreciate and agree with Lucinda's and Ian's and other comments supporting bike lanes on Solano Avenue. Also wanted to share some examples of studies in Seattle where 2013 researchers did an A/B test of districts and business areas that did or did not get bike lanes. And for the bike lanes, they either did not reduce business, or one study that replaced 12 parking spaces with the bike lane, sales quadrupled. So I agree that adding more bike infrastructure is both important for economic benefits, for advancing our climate action goals, of which a lot of our emissions from transportation, as well as safety for all, not just bicyclists, but also walking. I happen to know someone who was bicycling while pregnant, until 6 months pregnant. So people with disabilities, like, or other medical concerns, depending on details, like they can also bicycle on Solano. And I appreciate Lucinda sharing her example that it's all ages need bike lanes, and also protected bike lanes help with feeling both secure and increasing the number of active transportation usage and less VMT. So I also want to share that personally, I like shopping on Solano. It would be a lot better to be able to be there by bike more often. I frequently bike along to most of my grocery runs and other errands, dry cleaning, restaurants, et cetera, if not walking. And having better infrastructure for biking will be better for Albany. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Those are all the speakers online.
Okay, very good. Back to the commission for discussion.
I noted a couple of, one misconception and one question from the speakers. Woman is left, but crosswalks will still be there. I know that's, just want to make that emphatic. And then there was a question about how the number of southern parking spaces were increased. And I'll just say that it's because the angle has been changed. If anybody has any questions, refer you to the expert.
Good, thank you. Right, other comments?
I have some, I could go. Okay, all right. I've been trying to come up with ways to phrase this, but essentially, I want our emergency workers to be safe. And if they need to work on Solano, then close it. The numbers show that we were given show that they're there an average of 7 minutes a day, averaged out. That's not a lot. We currently have a situation where there are cyclists on the sidewalk, probably more than that on any given day, and that's a danger to pedestrians now. We don't have the police coming to protect those pedestrians from the cyclists. It's not it's kind of apples to oranges, but I think it illustrates that there's room in the plan to adjust to protect the emergency service people better, I think. I don't think we need to worry about that at this time. I think we need to look at the positive effects that many of the callers and speakers voiced. It's a challenge to visualize a new configuration and how it operates. We don't have a complete working model of Solano Avenue showing us, how often bikes are expected to come and how often people are moving from their cars to the sidewalk. But what we're talking about with a uphill protected bike lane is really a way to further separate out the modes of transportation. And I still feel that's very valuable, and it goes to our climate action goals. It goes to providing spaces that more people will feel comfortable cycling in. E-bikes and bicycles in general are assistive devices to many people, as was mentioned. If you have a limp, if you have, you know, a lack of strength in your limbs, but you can still balance, an e-bike is an amazing tool. Even as a mostly able-bodied person, I've had some problems with my feet, and I can't walk up and down Solano, but I can bike anywhere I want on some days. It's fabulous. I want to point out that the pain of parking is in the shape of the parking space. So if you're parallel parking, yes, you're going to have to convince people behind you maybe to back up. It can happen. But the diagonal parking spaces just delay that pain to the time where you're trying to get out. And you can't really see if your backup camera is blocked by a larger vehicle. There's already a lot of pain in parking on Solano. We're not talking about making it that much more difficult, in my opinion. I think, you know, the city council asked for this planning document, and I really appreciate the work that's gone into it, and making it somewhat generic, I think, is very effective at looking at the overall issues and not getting bogged down in the details. And I appreciate that. I'm just going to move now that we add Solano to the ATP cycling network and continue to plan for uphill cycling track on Solano.
Okay. Before we get a second on that, we need a motion to extend.
I'll motion us to extend another 30 minutes. Is that too long?
15?
15 minutes? Okay, 10:15.
We get a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Seeing none? Okay.
Chair, if I may, I think many of us have a divergence of opinions on this issue, and I think it's premature to call the question.
Yeah, no, not calling the question. We can still continue discussion while we have a motion. And we can either continue to discuss and then have a second or motion. So either way, does anyone have further comments or a second?
Commissioner, would you like me to belay my ask for a second?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
He's correct.
Okay.
We still need a second.
We can have more discussion.
I can second it, but
Okay.
I do also want to continue to have a
Right.
conversation.
Very good. We have a second then, and more comments. Go ahead.
Should I go next? Okay. So I'll start by saying that I also agree that we should approve these designs, and I think it's been like kudos to our the design team for coming up with such a thoughtful plan to accommodate all of these different requests that were asked of you. I can imagine it was really challenging. I want to comment to or respond to a few of the comments that were made by the public. Again, you know, kind of this idea that people can't shop and do things on Solano with their bikes. And I have 3 young kids. My oldest is 9 years old, and we primarily use our bikes. And I do all of my grocery shopping by bike. We go the bookstore on our bike. We go to Flowerland and carry things on our bike. We get our Christmas tree. Well, actually, we use a wagon for that. But you know, it is. I recognize that not everybody is going to do that. But saying that it's not possible is just not accurate. There's many people who are like me. My kids go to Cornell, and I am frequently talking to parents who are dropping their kids off by bike. And I'm not a unique case. There's many people who are using their bikes, to shop and participate on Solano Avenue. And I'll just add that, now that my oldest is 9 and riding his own bike, and my 6-year-old is also kind of on his own bike, we've actually stopped shopping on Solano and have gone more to 4th Street, because they can bike. It's more comfortable for them to be on their own bikes going to 4th Street than it is to Solano, which is a huge disappointment. And so, having this protected bike lane I think that there's this misconception that everybody who has a family is driving to Solano, and that's just not accurate. So I wanted to dispel that that inaccuracy. And then my only other two comments are, also I think that Lucinda and Catherine brought up a really important point, which is this design is in alignment with commitments that the City of Albany has already made in terms of trying to reduce vehicular traffic, being thoughtful about climate action, investing in active transportation. And so I think this is an important thing to move forward on, just to show that we are making action with our commitments and that our word is not for nothing. You know, we can't pass these I don't know what aspirational goals and then not actually do the work to make them happen. So I think that this is a really important kind of thing to show the City of Albany that all of our citizens that we're actually taking action and we're doing something, and it's not just something that we're saying that we'll do. Okay, so finally, my two design notes is that I agree that the crossing distance, I think this has come up a few times, I think that the crossing distance for pedestrians, really, we need to keep that minimized. As many people have said, Solano there's a lot of fast-moving cars, and it can be really unsafe to cross. So I think as you continue to further design this, being really thoughtful about how we can minimize that distance as much as possible, by utilizing those floating curbs or other ideas. And the other thing that I want to bring up that Judy has brought up several times is, making sure that we can keep the sidewalks for pedestrians and minimizing the need for bicyclists to go onto the sidewalk. And so I would also propose that we, in the further designs, that we have bike parking on the street. So one idea could be having that at the beginning of each block, based on the direction that you're traveling, and even potentially have it in that daylighting zone where cars can't park. But I think that having on-street bike parking is important to kind of keep that separation from bikes and pedestrians, especially the eastbound where, we have that kind of dedicated lane. And I think that's everything I have to comment on. Thank you.
Additional comments, Michael?
Yeah. I have a lot of comments. So I want to
Microphone.
If you could be closer to the microphone, please. Thank you.
I want to address my comments first as a member of this commission, a former member of the city council. Then I want to talk a little bit about my personal experiences and a cyclist. So I think there's three big issues which are glaring problems which we're not giving enough weight to. One is the fire department and the need for 15-foot wide lanes. I spend a lot of time on Solano between drinking too much espresso and walking or riding to get it, doing Blue Glove Crew one day a week, and just walking along Solano to do a lot of my shopping. The big fire truck, and I don't know why fire departments drive the big fire trucks for what are mostly medical cases, typically heart attacks in older people, but they do, and they don't put medical equipment on the back of the truck because that's where the hose is. So yeah, when they're on Solano, and I've seen them do this, they're opening up the side of the truck to get medical equipment out. And if they say they need 15 feet, I believe it. Because remember, we had this issue with the width of Washington Street as it drops down Pierce Street, and we actually brought the fire truck up there and showed people just, if you want us to be able to get to your house in a fire, really need space. The second big issue that we're ignoring is this is not a cycle track for the whole street. It's a cycle track for a quarter of the street. I looked this up on Google Earth this morning. basically, the street is a little over 6,000 feet long. The distance where we're going to put it to cycle track is from Masonic to Tulare. That's about 3,000 feet. So you've got, just in the uphill direction, this only covers half of the street. Then, on the downhill side, it doesn't cover any of the street. So you're talking about a bike path that covers 1/4 of the street. And the issue, this has been discussed before, is what do you do when you get to the top of the bike path? You got to go somewhere. You can't go back down the bike path because it's one way uphill. So you have the same old problem. You're in the street going downhill, or maybe if you can cut over towards your house and go on Washington, maybe you can do that. This is more of a demonstration project than it is a real cycle path because it's too short. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but finally, the other big problem here is we're building this cycle track with a mental image that is out of date because for the most part, there are not going to be bicycles on the cycle track. There's going to be e-bikes. And there's a huge bow wave of problems with safety on e-bikes, typically involving teenagers who have e-bikes and go too fast, and you can imagine, and they go uphill just as fast. The idea that e-bikes going uphill are going to be slower is not the case because I've seen them go 20 miles an hour up Solano. And if that is also going to be an area where kids are running around getting in and out of their cars, and somebody on a 50-pound bicycle who weighs 100 pounds and they have one of their friends on the back, that's being hit by 200 pounds of stuff. So this is something I think we need to think about more in the future. The other issue is that Solano Avenue is a destination shopping center. Those businesses thrive because a lot of people come distances further away than they can bike or walk to be on the street. This is especially true for restaurants now because we have a policy of subsidizing new restaurants on the street, which made the San Francisco Chronicle because it's been very successful and the business people are happy. But a lot of those folks don't live within cycling distance. So in some sense, people, I think, who are like us can walk and bike the street. Think of all those out-of-town people as like sort of free riders, but I think it's the other way around. We're the free riders because we can walk to the street, but the viability of the businesses on the street depends on people driving here from farther away. That's something to keep in mind. And when I do Blue Glove Crew, I walk down the street and I go, could I ride my bike and do business at that shop or that shop or that shop? When I was working and I was shelling out a lot of money to have my shirts and my suits dry cleaned, I would not stuff them in my bike pannier and go home. I'm sorry. I would pick them up in a car. Some shopping, I typically have never done that on my bicycle. There comes a point where if you load up your bike too much, it's hard to maneuver. Some bikes really aren't designed for center of gravity changes. It's really a problem with e-bikes and kids riding their friends on the back of their e-bikes. Florists, I know a couple of the florists. I would never spend $150 on a beautiful bouquet and stick it in my bike panniers. Well, maybe I'm more picky, but especially if you've already got it in a vase.
How do you protect it in your car? Yeah, I mean.
Oh, you put the seat. Amir at Solano Florist has a very good technique for doing, trust me, I've done it a lot. There are shops where I think, although some people may be willing to ride a bike and shop, use those businesses, there are some, buying a rug from Solano Rug Gallery. Yeah, but not everybody's going to do that. There's exceptions to rules.
We are running short on time, and I think I don't want to cut you off, but we are retreading ground we've already discussed. We are not eliminating all the parking. If a few less people locally drive to Solano, all the people from the region who want to drive there will still be able to drive there if we only lose 6% of the parking. So we're talking about changes on the margins, that we're not excluding anybody. I would like to.
All right, so I'll make
I
one more
acknowledge that we're never going to be on the same page on that. That's okay. We're not trying to serve everyone with one mode. We're going to serve all modes.
All right, so I'll just make one more comment. The comment about climate change, I think, is not really relevant because the per capita carbon dioxide production in America is 3.8 metric tons per person. And if a 1 gallon of gasoline contains 20 pounds of CO2. So if you do the math, it turns out, like when I would ride my bike to campus, I would ride 1,500 miles a year just commuting. That saved about 3% of carbon, per capita carbon produced in America. So the distances really aren't long enough. You know, if you don't fly to Europe, you're really making a big dent in your carbon dioxide output. But commuting a mile or two every day to Solano doesn't make a huge dent. And finally, we have had this project on Keynes and Adams, and we haven't come up with the money yet to complete that project after 3 years. So where are we going to come up with 30 to 50 million?
Pause you to get another extension to 15 minutes.
I move that we extend the meeting another 15 minutes to 10:30.
No, I will not be voting in favor of this.
Any seconds on the extension?
I'll second because I'd like to speak.
Thank you, Judy. All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Can I just wanted to respond to one thing that you said.
Let's let other people comment.
Okay.
I appreciate it, but Judy, go ahead.
I want to remind the commission what we are really making a recommendation for tonight, which is if we should include Solano in the active transportation plan. We're not agreeing to any designs right now. We are simply saying that we want to continue looking into this option. Many of the concerns that both the public and that you just mentioned are solvable without eliminating the bike path. The fire department need for 15-foot lanes, so valid. Like, let's look into that. There are so many ways that we can try to get those 15 feet that don't involve eliminating the bike lane. So let's explore those further. The fact that this only covers half of Solano and that transition between the segments is tough. Agreed. I ride Marin all the time, and it is hard. That transition is hard, but there are ways that we can address that. And let's take this opportunity to continue talking about it so that we can solve those concerns without eliminating the entire bike lane. Like, none of these concerns are serious enough and cannot be solved. None of these concerns can only be solved by eliminating the bike lane. There are ways to solve all of these problems. And many of those solutions have been presented in these conceptual designs. I will save time by not sharing my personal anecdotes of why I think that this is important, because so many people already articulated it very, very well. So obviously, I appreciate everyone else's time for sharing those stories, and I echo it. I will also just add some areas that we should continue to look into further as we keep talking about this for further study, which definitely echoing bulb outs, absolutely need to continue to prioritize pedestrian crossing safety. I'd love to keep looking into the mitigations for avoiding the pedestrian and bike conflict. I heard that concern and appreciated Pete's suggestions and would be eager to hear what else is possible. A lot of commenters noted correctly that we also have Washington and Marin. People also noted that those corridors serve very, very different purposes. So let's continue designing Solano with that use in mind. and which includes addressing the bike parking needs, as Sarah mentioned, and another public commenter mentioned. And then also continue to explore there were some other options mentioned to mitigate parking, that might make that percentage shift a little bit. So that was like the curb ramp, curb allocation, bus stop types. So just continue to look into those. I'd also add, I'm sure there was a design decision for this. We don't need to get into it, but there are some areas where angled parking was excluded. So looking into if those spaces could be added. But just let's please remember what we are doing, which is looking to add this to the transportation plan for future study.
Thank you. Well said.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to have a chance to sort of listen to all of you and try to put together what my thoughts are. I am not going to vote to support to include this in the active transportation plan. I'm really kind of sad that I can't, but this is a 60-foot wide curb-to-curb surface. There are 8,000 cars, buses, and trucks going up and down it every day. Fire department has already added some additional constraints beyond what the parametrics team had already discussed and explored. And it just doesn't make sense to me when we have parallel streets, Portland and Marin, that we would try to make something out of something that isn't meant to be. And it really kind of breaks my heart when I hear people say that they just want someplace where they can safely bring their kids up and down the street. They didn't hear Justin Fried say, this is not going to be a comfortable facility. It's going to be a downhill race and an uphill battle. And it breaks my heart that people aren't really understanding the constraints that are just built in. What I would rather see, and what I would like our active transportation plan to look like, would be access by the north-south streets to Solano with really good bicycle facilities for parking at the corners and really broad sidewalks for pedestrians to use. So I will not be supporting this, and those are the reasons.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add a point of clarification for the comfort comment. I believe that was just talking about the downhill direction being not suitable for all ages and abilities given the traffic volume and speed.
And in relation to the comfort in the uphill, the further discussion of unloading kids and strollers and safety crossing a lane that's being occupied by an electric bike going 20 miles an hour uphill is my concern.
So the alternative is what we currently have, which is the status quo, where nothing is acceptable for all ages and abilities.
Okay. I know we're not all going to agree on this. And the good news is you don't have to, because the question before us is still, should we continue to evaluate this? And I think that when there are concerns, continuing to evaluate absolutely makes sense. Can we resolve those concerns? Can we make the bike crossings or the pedestrian crosswalk something that makes sense? You know, all of these things, these are the comments we're giving. Let's study this further. Let's study that further. That's great. So I think my comments on those are, I think we should try to keep the crosswalks as functionally short as we can, because that's going to keep the cars slower. That's why Solano is slow on most of it anyway. I don't need a cycle track because I'm already comfortable riding up and down Solano. And I was before it became 20 miles an hour. I'm not advocating this for me. I also don't need a handicapped parking space right now. There have been times when I did, but the point is we have to design for everyone. And so I'm acknowledging that. So the comments you've already heard about the shorter crosswalks, possibly raised crosswalks, I kind of like the idea of a raised cycle track. I also kind of like the idea of one that's separated from the height of the curb, so a half-height cycle track. That way and raised crosswalks, so the people in the cycle track have a speed hump that they've got to cross every time they cross a pedestrian path of travel. And pedestrians have a queue when they're stepping off the curb into the cycle track, and then another queue when they're stepping into the parking lane. None of these is like a silver bullet. Everything has to work together. And we're not nearly detailed enough in design to judge, yes, this is good, or no, it's not good. I think that every bikeway I've worked on has been a piece of the network. And if I was always, stopped by, well, it doesn't connect to everything, none of it would have ever been built. It's all incremental. We're connecting one end to the Ohlone Greenway, our major bike route north-south. I'm like, that's a perfectly good ending point. Connecting the other end to where Berkeley is contemplating doing the same thing. And that'll get us to the bikeways on the Alameda. So I don't see it as a bikeway to nowhere, and that's not the point. The point is, do we take this as a policy recommendation to say, we should keep looking at this, put it in the ATP as a study corridor, and we've got a concept that is preserving most of the parking. What can we do to make it more comfortable? If you want to go fast on a bike, go on Marin. That's basically what I would do, and I tend to ride on what's my shortest path. But I also try to take the road that is faster road for me on a bike if I don't want to go slow, and I want Solano to be slow for everyone. 20-mile-an-hour speed limit should be, well, that's the speed limit, but I can't go that fast because it doesn't feel comfortable or because no one else is going that fast. And we need to set that behavior for people on micro-mobility devices, as well as people in cars and trucks and all those things. That's fine. Solano's not the route you take when you're in a hurry. It should be what everyone expects. And you should also believe I can find somewhere to park my bike in a bike corral in the daylighting zone before every crosswalk. I can find a place to park my car because we still have plenty of car parking. And we designed the parallel parking spaces so they're easy to get in and out of. And I can see the cars coming down the street when I pull out of that parallel parking space a whole lot better than I did out of the angle parking spaces. All these things have to come together. We're not there. So I appreciate everyone's input, everyone's concerns, because all of those are going to be necessary before we have a project that we're even ready to finish designing, find funding for. So many things are going to change before we get there. This is a long-term vision, and I'm going to vote to keep working on this vision and try to solve it. So, and really great work by everyone on staff, on the consulting team, and again, the fact that we're having a debate up here over what we like and don't like is good. And I appreciate everyone's input on this because it's all going to be necessary to get to something that is, at the end, the best possible choice to vote yes or no on, at council. So with that, unless anyone wants to add more, I'd love to just take a vote and we can have a split vote, and that's okay. Call roll.
Vice Chair Barnes.
What is the motion again?
So
I would happily restate the motion. I move that we add Solano to the ATP cycling network and continue to plan for the potential of an uphill cycle track on Solano.
I like that because, again, it's not committing to this is the project, keep on planning. We have the second, so.
Vice Chair Barnes.
No.
Commissioner Hiley.
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr.
No.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Zuba.
Yes.
Chair Javendel. Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. Our next item, announcements. We got like 2 minutes, almost.
Real quick, just updates. Marin Phase 2 continues, and storm drain improvements are, I think, on Peralta this week, and expect to move to Nielsen next week. So that project construction continues.
Don't fall in the ditch.
I think that was my only comment.
Okay.
And I just like to apologize. I think you may have noticed that I took a step back at this meeting. I was planning to announce it before leaving, but my partner and I had a child a little earlier than expected, so I didn't have time to share with you all then. So I've been out for the past few weeks and haven't been totally up to speed on everything. But happy to be back, and yeah.
Congratulations.
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 Congrats. No apology needed. Thank you. Okay, so with that good news, we are adjourned until our next meeting on Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. Thank you all.